What?
Do you haven't opened up the supplemental request for the zoning?
No.
There's a little bit of cost.
Uh-huh.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our May 6, 2026 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. For those of you who are with us and may not already have one, there are paper copies of our agenda available by the door. There's also coffee back there for anybody who needs it. And the full packet is available on our website with all available agenda items. Reviewing our full agenda, first we'll consider, actually today we have a proclamation first up, and then we'll consider our consent agenda, which has a total of 7 items on it today. And then we will move into general public comment. We welcome general public comment for addressing issues that are not on today's agenda, but otherwise related to county business. Excuse me, I should say that are not on today's business agenda, but otherwise related to county business. Given our limited time and the need to have an orderly and efficient meeting, we do apply certain rules given regarding public comments. We will do our best to enforce those rules consistently and without regard to the point of view expressed by the speaker. Each speaker will be limited to a total of 3 minutes of speaking time. However, we will accept public comment of any length in writing. Individual speakers may not donate unused time to other speakers. All comments must address topics within the jurisdiction of the County Commission, and we reserve the right to mute and remove any speaker whose comments are threatening, aggressively hostile, or belligerent. Campaigning for public office during the public comment period is not allowed. Please give your full name and residence for our meeting minutes if you're comfortable doing so, and please address your comments directly to the Commission. We will hear from people who are here in person first, then we'll look to our Zoom meeting attendees. If you are online, please use the raise your hand function if you wish to provide your public comment virtually. Please also know that the comments received by the Commission during our meetings do not necessarily represent the views of Douglas County government, but we value the input. We don't usually respond to general public comment on the spot, but if you leave your contact information with county staff, we will try and get specific questions answered. After general public comment concludes, we'll move on to our regular business agenda for tonight. There are just 2 items on that this evening. For each action item, we will hear from staff or an applicant, followed by questions from the commission of staff and the applicant. And then we will open the floor for public comment that is relevant to that item. Once public comment is concluded, we will bring that item back to the commission for further discussion and a vote on any action items. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on the county's YouTube page and website. With that, we will jump into our proclamation for the week, which Commissioner Kelly is going to read for us. And then afterwards, whoever might be here for that proclamation is welcome to come up and provide a few additional comments. We'll have a signed proclamation for you.
Well, it's my pleasure to read a proclamation for the National Travel and Tourism Week, the week of May 3rd through the 9th. Whereas travel and tourism is a critical pillar of our city and county's economic development and supports local business, workforce, and overall community vitality. And whereas visitors spent $295.7 million in direct spending in Douglas County in 2024, which reflects continued growth and resilience following the impacts of the 2020 pandemic. And whereas the visitor economy generated $31.6 million in state and local taxes and directly supported 2,742 jobs, or 5.4% of all jobs in Douglas County. And whereas Douglas County has been preparing to welcome a large number of visitors this summer for the FIFA World Cup 2026, including the men's Algerian national team who will set up their training base camp at Rock Chalk Park. And whereas strong preparation and thoughtful planning will allow Douglas County to maximize the economic impact of visitor spending while showcasing our arts, culture, and local business. And whereas Douglas County stands ready to host and welcome a world audience to share in our radical hospitality for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And whereas the experience of welcoming World Cup visitors can have a lasting impact on Douglas County's visibility as a travel destination for years to come. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Douglas County Board of County Commissioners do hereby proclaim May 3rd through the 9th, 2026 as National Travel and Tourism Week in Douglas County, Kansas, and urge the residents to join in this special observance with appropriate events and commemorations. Adopted this day, May 6th, 2026.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. I believe I see Kim. Please come forward and share whatever you'd like us to hear. Make sure you press that button so that the light turns green on the microphone. There you go.
There we go. Okay, thank you, commissioners. I'm Kim Onspach. I'm the executive director of Explore Lawrence. And while our name might imply we focus only on Lawrence, we do market the county as a cohesive unit. So thank you today for recognizing National Travel and Tourism Week and the role that tourism plays in our shared economy and quality of life. As the proclamation said, in 2024, visitors spent nearly $296 million of direct spending in Douglas County. That activity supported over 2,700 jobs, with 1 in every 14 jobs in the county tied to the visitor economy. It also generated $31.6 million in state and local tax revenue, supporting services that benefit residents countywide. The impact of tourism is truly a countywide impact. Visitors don't just experience one place, they experience Douglas County as a whole. Our communities, our events, cultural assets, and our natural spaces work together to shape the experience, which speaks to the strength and appeal of what we offer collectively as a county. We appreciate the recognition today, and I look forward to continuing to build on tourism's role in Douglas County. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Here is your proclamation to take with you. Yeah, no, please. We're not judges. Thank you. All right. With that, we will move on to our consent agenda. Commissioners, are there any items that you wish to remove for further questions or discussion? All right, seeing no takers, is there anybody in the public who wishes to remove anything from the consent agenda? Any virtual hands, Sarah?
Yes, there's a virtual hand raised. I'm not sure if it's to remove an item from the consent agenda or for public comment. So Mike Harold, are you wanting to provide public comment or remove an item from the consent agenda?
We go. For public comment, it's not letting me lower my hand right now.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's so we'll have you wait until we get to that place. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect.
And I will pull 2.5.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we have item 2.5 pulled, open to a motion from other commissioners.
Motion to approve the consent agenda items 2.1, 2, 3, 4, and 6.
7.
And 7, sorry.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All right, that passes unanimously. Commissioner Anderson, did you want to kick off whatever questions you have about 2.5?
Yes. So for 2.5, considering the comprehensive plan amendment, I have questions in regards to the changes related to updating with new Lawrence and Douglas County zoning districts. So knowing that we have the Clarion Diagnostic Review that is currently in draft and not yet finalized, I'm curious as to why we are updating the zoning districts at this time.
Drew Bealby is in the panel. Those were already, but those zoning districts were approved in 2019. So they've already been approved. So we're simply adding them to the comp plan because they were previously approved in 2019. If I got that wrong, Drew, please correct me and add anything you'd like.
Nope, you got it. Perfect.
So even though so I went back and I took a look at the Clarion Diagnostic Review. In the Clarion Diagnostic Review that we received just a couple of weeks ago, it states in there as a part of their suggestions that updating the 2040 plan is a part of that process. So I'm still curious as to why we're moving forward with this particular update when a part of their review and process is to update the 2040 plan. So it seems like we should maybe wait for this process for their final recommendations and then go ahead and make these changes and or edits after their review is finalized.
I think our concern is these have been in place for quite some time and had not been added, and that there are other changes that were made that need to be incorporated into the comp plan. And if you're constantly, we frankly, in my view, we're delayed and delinquent in getting this comp plan amendment done. So I think we could continue to wait, but then there's always more changes. When do you update the comp plan? We would come back and update the comp plan again after the Clarion review.
Sarah,
that
is it fair
correct,
to,
Drew?
oh, sorry. Sarah, Andrew, is fair to say that, I mean, there's been a number of amendments or changes that have been made, minimal or otherwise, to Plan 2040 since it was enacted, right? It's a sort of
Yes.
living document to some degree.
Yes.
When was the last time the 2040 plan was updated?
The last time it was updated was October of 2023.
And we missed these at that time, Drew?
Correct. Yep, that was more. That was just adding in our the Transportation 2050 plan. It wasn't really a comprehensive plan review. That's what this was essentially finding all of the broken links, all of the old data that we now had new data of, and incorrect references. So that's why they got caught now, essentially. This was the first time we really put it through a fine-tooth comb to see what was outdated.
Has the city signed off on their piece of things?
Yes, it was approved last night.
Commissioners, any other questions?
Well, I'm still just kind of curious. So if these are from 2019 or 2020, but in 2023, we did not make those particular changes, especially to the new zoning districts, why we're not waiting for the Clarion Diagnostic Review, knowing that they may suggest some additional zoning districts?
One thing to keep in mind is the diagnostic review is a multi-phase process. So what we're going through right now is a sort of a technical review where you'll get an issues list that may or may not coincide with what's being through this process. This, from my understanding, has gone through the full process of public review. This is part of it tonight. The zoning diagnostic has not had that discussion, and I would probably venture to guess that's going to take a significant amount of time and investment, both in dollars and staff time, to get us to a point where we would make any changes or adoptions through that process. If that clears it up, I just want to point out this is a separate process than the diagnostic, and the diagnostic is going to take a considerable amount of time and public engagement before we would make any changes or suggest any changes.
And can we clarify what we mean exactly by updated with new Lawrence and Douglas County zoning districts? I mean, so when we say the word new, what do we really mean by the word new? Like, how new is new?
It's
As of
from 2019. It was just the latest is probably how it should have been phrased, Drew.
Yeah, I mean, it's new in terms of what this plan has, I guess.
But you are correct. It is 7 years old.
Okay, so Drew, these new zoning districts are 7 years old.
For the county, yes. Part of this was also because the city had brand new zoning districts with the 2024 Land Development Code.
That's probably the biggest change you're seeing is, again, we have a joint code. So again, you're also being asked to approve some of the city aspects of this. And that's, I think, as Drew mentioned, the Land Development Code did have some changes to it, which are reflected in this update.
I'd say that would be part of our concern with not updating the comp plan at this time. Then for a period of time, we would not have the same comp plan as the city.
Yeah, I think there is concern for me in delaying this any further, specifically because the I fully expect that the diagnostic review is going to result in some recommended changes to that plan, to your point, Commissioner Anderson. And the point is that we can continually go through processes that sometimes start in different ways, and sometimes they're very small and technical, and sometimes they're much more broad policy, content heavy conversations, if you will, that can be separate and apart from one another. So I don't think that it is efficient for us to hold up one change that, as we've heard from staff, is long overdue at this point, or has been slow walked in terms of incorporating it technically into Plan 2040 and making those things align. So I would encourage us to stay forward on that path, knowing full well that there will be other changes to come, and that maybe a conversation about how long it takes for us to incorporate those changes and make sure that they're adopted is part of the conversation.
And I just want to make sure we're not opening the door for certain use cases that we, that may have unintended consequences.
All of these uses have been in place since 2019.
Okay.
Really just about bringing the large comprehensive plan in alignment with our zoning and codes. And zoning and codes, whether it's us at the county dealing with it or a municipality, looking at their zoning and codes or land development use, is really what drives, you know, the decision-making process more than anything. So bringing the comp plan in alignment with those, I think, does tend to be the afterthought, for lack of a better word, right? That the making sure that our zoning and codes are where we want them to be, and as they were developed in 2019, and then getting them incorporated into other larger community plans. Clearly, there's been some lag time on that.
I'm excited to have a clean copy, especially as we're going to have, you know, some larger discussions about code. But this is, I mean, it was a big lift when these zoning districts were updated, but we've been using them. We use them, you know, every time we talk about land use. So when we talk about like Ag 1 and Ag 2, that was not a distinction that existed before this 2019 change. I'm looking here at like the Big Springs Community District. There was a large and involved community discussion about, you know, what served that community at Big Springs the best. A lot of input that went into that. So I'm glad to see all of those things reflected in this shared document that, you know, Planning Commission has signed off on and city has signed off on, and I'm glad to see our part of it also be updated and clean.
Commissioner, I'd also add that it looks like it's an update to Plan 2040 for the open space plan and Adapt Douglas County. Those are both new parts that have been added to the comprehensive plan. So I'm glad to see those. That's a lot of work by a lot of people and getting a lot of feedback. So glad to see those included.
And has AG2 always been listed for commercial?
I'd have to go back and look at the code from 2019. That's what we approved in 2019. So I'd have to go back and look at what the code was before that. But we could certainly follow up on that with you, Commissioner, later.
Drew, do you know? I just want to make sure, because it was hard to track back and forth between the old plan and the new plan.
Yeah, so it lived, so kind of as mentioned before, there wasn't an Ag 1 and an Ag 2. It was just A for agriculture. So this is where it broke down between pure agriculture, which is AG1, and then the transitional agriculture use, zoning district, where that permits some of those kind of what you would expect to be commercial, but agriculture commercial. And so we have it listed in that table as rural commercial, which is where it kind of fits in, because it's not necessarily like, you know, grocery stores and businesses. It's more so like agricultural support commercial. That's where it falls under. So yeah, I would say AG2 is kind of that new transitional commercial agriculture zoning district.
Drew, can I push back on that a little bit for some clarification?
Yeah.
You know, between Ag 1 and Ag 2, it's more the size of the lot, especially if it has a house on it. So we were trying to kind of have a process for when we were having smaller lots divided out, that became a public process as opposed to just happening kind of under the radar. So I don't think that Ag 1 and Ag 2 really offer a lot of commercial type of activities. It's really just residential, is my understanding.
And those uses were allowed in Ag before. So it was
Right.
not new use.
It's more lot size.
It's more lot size.
So to that point then, Commissioner Willie, is Ag 2 appropriate for commercial on this particular, in this plan, since with the explanation he just gave?
And as far as like going back and relitigating all of the items in here, I think we would have to do due diligence with that. We'd have to go back and watch all of the meetings that was discussed over the course of the couple of years that process went through. I'm not interested in doing that from here at this time. But those are all questions that could be asked during the zoning diagnostic if there are other topics that want to come up. At this point, it's just making our documents match.
But yeah, it is it is correct. If that's your question, is it correct to the current use? It is correct to the current use.
Commissioners, any other questions about this before I open for public comment since we pulled this? Okay. Anybody in the audience wish to provide public comment on item 2.5 on our consent agenda?
Hamilton 66044. One thing that you might consider in the zoning changes is a specific classification for data centers. Sedgwick County has a moratorium on data centers coming in while they're pondering exactly how to do that. And they're going to require data centers to have special use permits. But they're also pondering the same thing. Since you're making sort of wholesale change to the zoning, it would be good to consider what the state of Oregon has done. Well, now these are state things, so this is certainly above your pay grade. But Oregon and Missouri have begun just their own specific classification for data centers. So it looks like under home rule, you guys would have the opportunity to do that. So you ought to think about doing that since that will be coming down the road.
Hi, Chelsea Hayden. I actually wasn't thinking about this, but hearing your conversation, I just wanted to double check, or maybe I had a question regarding the AG1 and AG2. If the uses pretty much mirror one another in the code, and I know there is some commercial use in AG1 and AG2, like by additional permit CUPs and things. But if in AG2 it's not commercial use without the same mirroring of what's in AG1, I guess I just would ask if that is appropriate to be listed in, added to the list of commercial uses in the rural chunk. If I believe there was nothing under the commercial uses before, because the A didn't have commercial uses without by right. And so I just wonder if maybe it's a question for Drew, if the uses are actually the same in AG1 and AG2, and it's more about the piece of property, then maybe it shouldn't be listed in the commercial type, since the AG1 is not listed in the commercial type and it doesn't seem to be needed to be added into that particular chart. Although it sounds like that may come up during the diagnostic and that might change. But just for now, I'm not sure if it's different than AG1 as far as commercial type is related. So I just had that question, I guess, for Drew, which he doesn't need to answer for me, but you guys could ask him to clarify.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else have public comment about this item?
How's it going, Commission? My name is John Chaffee. First time here. Concerning the data centers, I took time on, I believe it was Monday night, to go out to the school out near North Lawrence.
John, can I just make sure that your comment is related to the 2.5 item on the consent agenda that we're talking about?
It's
about the
data center?
I'm sorry.
The data center?
No, it's not. Actually, we're talking about something on our consent agenda. Somebody in their other public comment talked about data center usage related to it, but we're talking about a slightly separate thing right now. General public comment will start soon. Thank you. Anybody else with comments about item 2.5 on the consent agenda, which is considering a comprehensive plan amendment for 2020 or 2040? Any virtual hands difference there? Okay. Thank you. We'll go ahead and close public comment and bring this back to the commission for any additional questions that they might have of staff, comments or motions.
So Drew, going back to Chelsea's question in regards to AG1 and AG2 and commercial, do you have any further clarifying comments?
Yes. So I took a quick look at the use table, the permitted use tables. And so there are a few uses that are allowed in AG2 that aren't in AG1. Most of these are still with conditional use permits, but that does mean that they are allowed with the CUP. So that are schools, daycare centers, religious institution large, boat and RV storage, self-storage, indoor sports or recreation facilities. So those uses are permitted either by CUP or as an accessory use, whereas in the AG1 they are not permitted at all.
I stand corrected and I appreciate that, Drew. Thank you.
No, yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Drew. Commissioners, any other questions for staff?
I don't have a
Comments,
question.
motion?
I think my understanding of the item before us is that we are moving to take our current code and put it in the comprehensive plan. I'm happy to make a motion for that. It seems long overdue. Glad it's getting in there. I'm assuming that once we have the diagnostic completed and many, many steps after that, that we would do another update to it. But I don't like having the comprehensive plan not reflect our actual code. So I'm happy to make a motion unless other commissioners have comments. I move to approve the comprehensive plan amendment AMDT 26009 to Plan 2040 and adopt joint ordinance number 10210, county resolution number 2607.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, please say aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Simply because I would really like us to wait for the Clarion Diagnostic Review final to come in. So I'd like us to do it all at once.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Thank you, Drew, for being here for questions. With that, we will move on from our consent agenda, and now we will open up the floor for general public comment, which is an opportunity for folks to address county business that's not on today's regular business agenda. So with that, John, since I cut you off before, if you'd like to start us off, please come forward. And since I suspect there could be a number of folks talking today, I believe that a sign-up sheet has been provided over there. That's really helpful for our staff for minutes. So after you make your comment, if you could sign in, that would be great. And then the next person can come forward as soon as John's done talking.
Good evening, Commission. Mulligan. So yes, the data center, as I was saying, I went to the school on Monday and listened to a small presentation that kind of reactive, but had good information that I feel like is neglected in kind of our anti-science society that it's become recently. Just for starters, just because I know I have 3 minutes, just get to bare bone points. The data center will want to say that it has emergency usage times for peak run, and one of those is between 40 and 50 hours for peak run time, and that is, as you pointed out during your meeting, specifically done off of self-generation, which is off of generators on site and typically heavy diesel unregulated. I don't know if it was due to the 1971 Clean Water Air Act, recently having been gutted a couple of years ago, but those generators are spewers, essentially energy guzzlers. Concerning your battery storage facility, lithium ion is the cheapest rechargeable available on the market. If you wonder why the manufacturer of that, the producer of these AI centers are picking them, you have your answer right there. If anyone remembers the flood of 93, it was pretty horrible, and North Lawrence took a huge brunt of it. We also have the Baker wetland. I don't know exactly where this development is being considered, but this is not intelligible for our land, especially given they're not making great farmland, and for Lawrence to have escaped the Dust Bowl in the way it did, it would be negligent of us to neglect our farmland in such a way. I don't know who the gentleman was here at the table next to Sean Peterson, but do research. I mean, the AI data centers have been going strong since 2018, and every 2 years they double. Oh, 1 minute. Thank you. Sorry. I'm a salesman in my job, and I know that if you want an actual sale, you have to be prepared. And if you want to drag your feet, you don't know. It's not possible to stop the attempt of them trying to sell us. We are the carcass of live, and they are the vultures. And don't let them fool you. The staffing will be anywhere from 50 to 100 people, and the billing contraction will be from out of state. Also, NDAs in a local government is cowardly and should be illegal. They weren't prolific till 2018, which coincides with data centers becoming larger. And last but not least, please stop targeting the Baker wetland. We got the bypass, which the city desperately needed, but ecologically and environmentally, it should be a part of Lawrence and a part of the tourism that a woman spoke of here earlier. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Anybody else here who would like to provide general public comment?
Good evening. My name is Galadriel McAdams. I am a long-term Lawrence resident and a graduate student at KU's urban planning program. And I'm here regarding the county's ongoing work to develop the zoning standards for the data centers, the BESS, and other digital operations. I just want to make sure that we focus on any future decisions that are based on verified impacts rather than projections. There's a lot of available evidence out there that suggests these facilities operate at a scale that are comparable, like not comparable rather, to most traditional industrial uses. The proposed regional projects have been described as requiring 1.2 gigawatts of electricity, which is equivalent to the demand of a city like San Francisco. Research shows that these data centers place significant demands on local water systems. Some consume as much as small towns. And oftentimes these data centers are operating out of their long-term contracts, which can preempt in the case of a drought or a water shortage locally. You see cases where residents are on water rationing, where data centers are, working business as usual. So things they try to sell us on, long-term employment is often overstated. If we're looking at 20 to 100, permanent jobs, it's minimal compared to the amount of land, infrastructure, and public resources that are required. Tax revenue is an issue when you look at the Kansas Senate Bill 98, where these proposed qualifying data centers are receiving 20 years tax exemptions. That's deeply concerning. Where does the community begin to benefit? The infrastructure costs are not always contained within the project itself. Not only are we talking about the grid systems and things like that, but also decommissioning costs, which, we have to have a longer term perspective looking at these. As previously mentioned, other counties are already looking at these and are requesting moratoriums. Douglas County is in the same position right now. As per the earlier meeting, your own staff acknowledges that these codes are not clearly defined and require additional review. I would also say that we definitely need more time to involve local and community members and hear their voices about whether locals feel like these are needed and desired. So please take a look. These protections need to be in place ahead of time. Once they're locked in or contracts have signed, it is too late. So given those objects, please take that under consideration. We are requesting at the very least a moratorium so that this can be based on deliberate, informed, and long-term interests of Douglas County residents. Thank you.
John M. 66049. So I listened to the business meeting and I may have missed something, but let me just make a statement. And I don't expect any answers, but most of the discussion was about commercial uses, rightfully so, large installations for businesses. But I did see a picture about a power wall inside a house. So I don't know what kind of restrictions are being considered for in-home use or even backyard use for arrays of batteries for multiple purposes. I could run my whole household. I don't have to buy a generator. I can renew electric cars. And whether my house is inside Lawrence, which would make maybe a Lawrence zoning issue, but I could also be in districts outside of Lawrence, which would make it a Douglas County issue. I just didn't hear any conversation within the rules about that. And it seems like with those kinds of batteries, it's still a fire hazard because that's just the nature of lithium batteries. So it seems like there would be some sort of restrictions on non-commercial use, private use. Thank you.
John, next commenter.
Hi, my name is Kincaid Dennett, 66044. I just want to encourage the commission to be bold about this. I know that we can just talk about your jurisdiction around unincorporated areas, but your decision has an impact in the broader conversation about this. These data centers are trying to move in not just to unincorporated areas, but throughout the county. And this commission, who I could kind of tell that there's some suspicion about whether or not to go forward with these at all, your decision would give us tools in further advocacy to make sure that we keep these out of our broader community. So I think that the commission has an opportunity to help not only Douglas County, but also people in the rest of the state. Even in Sedgwick County, I believe the majority leader of the Kansas legislature was saying a moratorium of 3 years is what he was calling for. I would also add that I think that we should go beyond the moratorium, but we should at least start there. If we're developing regulations for how these can exist without a moratorium, we're just kind of slow walking into what kind of data centers can be allowed rather than stating plainly, we don't want that here. We don't have the infrastructure for it here. I would also add that the non-disclosure agreements in local government bring up big concerns about knowing who's talking to who about these conversations before. So I would ask the commission to trust themselves and their instincts about this and move forward boldly. Thank you.
Tim Hamilton, 66044, and I would echo the comments of the gentleman that was up here just a second ago, but for different reasons. So there's a friend of mine who has managed 2 data centers. He is a member of the Coalition for Collaborative Governance, which is I am on, and he says when he's managed them, there's been 22 workers. So there's the manager, there's the assistant manager, there's then 4 on security, 2 security guards that walk around, 1 guy that watches the cameras, another one that's like on standby. And then he said there's like 4 custodians that are cleaning up stuff, and then 10 other workers that are doing maintenance of the equipment, software, things like that. So that totals up 22 people. So that's not a lot of jobs. What I've seen, and I've started to research this as an economist to look at what's the impact going to be on electric bills and on water bills. And I've sent the commission my findings on that, which I have not yet finished the research. It's really, really a difficult research job, but it looks like it's probably a minimum of at least $50 a month bump up in electric bills if it's a big, big data center. and at least double to triple what your water bill is going to be. That's pretty significant. What I've noticed procedurally, what these companies do is they come in and they try to get a non-disclosure agreement with you guys and to talk to you privately so that nobody else gets to see that. Then they will offer the additional taxes, additional jobs as carrots to try and persuade you to do that. And then the vehicle they use is a community benefits agreement that they will usually has generic terms in it to sign up. At least that's sort of the protocol that's been done. So you'll probably see that coming down the pike. And it'll promise employment. It'll say there's not that much electrical work and that we'll be recycling water from underneath. So the water use won't be that bad. And there'll be all the tax revenue. And then the icing on the cake for the pitch is going to be, if you don't allow us to come in here to Douglas County, we're just going to go down the county down the road. They'd love to have us. They're going to give the jobs. They're going to get the tax benefits. And they're going to be pulling from the same Evergy line that everybody else is. So you're going to pay for it anyway, and you're not going to get any benefits. So come on in. But that's the pitch that's going to be coming this way. And I agree with the previous gentleman, which is trust your instincts. And if you're going to do it, make sure we get some guarantees and make sure that all of the meetings are transparent and public for all of us to see. That would really be the main thing. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else here? Don't be shy. You can feel free to form a line.
It's already on.
Hello, I am Caitlin Henry. I'm currently an undergrad student at the University of Kansas. I'm an environmental science major, and sitting in this room earlier, I heard a lot of conversation about how the data center issue is so new, it's constantly evolving, and an overall unpredictable issue. I'd like to say from an environmental standpoint, data centers have existed long enough where we know very well the impact of a large data center. Currently, for a final project in my class, one with a rapidly approaching due date, I'm studying the impact that data centers can have on communities like ours. In cases such as Prince William County and Data Center Valley in North Virginia, the people had to work against their government in an attempt to fight for their peace and their right to the resources of the land that they live on. I ask of you to please operate in a manner that is transparent, efficient, and on behalf of the people that you represent. Do not only consider if a data center is possible with existing resources, but if it's sustainable. Keep the younger generations growing up in a world of rapid climate change in mind. You hold the power to make a massive difference. Please, please, please make it a good one. Thank you for your time.
Caitlin, do you mind putting your name on the sign-in sheet for our staff? Thanks, it helps with minutes. Anybody else?
Hey, Commissioners, it's Chelsea Hayden, and I'm actually here tonight just to say thank you. I have really appreciated the opportunity to serve the community on the Planning Commission. And I know that the term is coming up and I'm up for reappointment at the end of the month. And I just wanted to reiterate what I set out in my letter that I sent to you all in early March, that I would love to continue my service. I was elected vice chair and chair. I'm currently the chair. And I've been appointed to serve and represent the county side of the County Commission on the North Lawrence Corridor Study. And as I probably just having the conversation earlier with Drew, there is so much technical nuances of the code. And having had the last 3.5 years I was appointed to fill someone else's term before my 3-year term. I've really been able to dive in and kind of figure it out. And I feel like I'm just now starting to understand that conversation that you guys just had. Earlier, I thought, oh gosh, yeah, I might have missed that when we looked at it earlier because there's so much going on with the depth of knowledge kind of sometimes needed. And I also really, really enjoy being able to be there for the community and have an open forum as the chair. That's one thing I've really worked on, making sure everyone feels very comfortable to give public comment and then to be accessible to people throughout the community. even outside of meetings. So I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity and let you know that I'd love to be reappointed, and I'm happy to take any questions anytime from you. Thank you.
Is there any other general public comment?
Hello, I'm Michael Allman, 66044 is my zip code. I noticed in the consideration of the regulations, there is a comment and a note about, excuse me, large scale versus smaller scale data centers. That's very unspecific. I think it should focus primarily on whether it's AI data centers or not, particularly generative AI data centers or large language data centers. Those are the ones that consume huge amounts of electricity. That's the consideration for scale that I don't think you're thinking in terms of a large building or a small building. And you have to consider that these are not a normal industrial use. These really are utilities, and they should be considered that in the zoning code. I don't think a CUP is an adequate way to approach something like these utilities, particularly when they're AI utilities. I don't know if you're going to create another zoning district, but I appreciated that discussion. There's all over the country right now, there are bounty hunters looking at every county in the country for a particular mix of infrastructure, which in the agenda, you're looking at the infrastructure considerations of water, electricity, and roads. There's more, of course, but what they're looking for primarily is where there's a power plant, where there's a substation, where there's water. Everything in that which these bounty hunters are going to be looking for are in Grant Township, particularly now that we're looking at possibly a solar generating capacity and battery storage. Flat land is another consideration of Grant Township. So I'm not interested in talking about a moratorium, which is just going to delay the inevitable. I think you should look at option 3 in your list, prohibited uses. In other words, a ban of data centers. We were told that the solar wouldn't be impervious, but now we're looking at buildings and pavement that should not be over the best prime farm soil in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Anybody else?
Sorry, I'm used to speaking at city commission, so this is a little different. My name is Dominique, and I've met most of the commissioners here. I just wanted to thank the commissioners for updating the comprehensive plan because it added the open space plan and the Adapt Douglas County plan, which is actually going to be useful for me when I go before the city and try to talk about the upcoming comprehensive plan amendment for the new project 1059, which was previously called New Boston Crossing. So I appreciate that. It gives me some framework to try to wiggle my way around some arguments for the city. And then later when it comes back to you guys too as well. I wanted to support the county reappointing Commissioner Hayden. I feel that she has provided beautiful and insightful, provocative questions and discussion during the planning commission meetings, and it has helped me personally as a citizen trying to understand all the technical and legal mumbo jumbo that I don't know as a citizen, and especially as somebody who's been new to a lot of government engagement. So I don't know if you guys, I know you guys don't have any authority, but if you could also nudge the city to maybe advocate for reappointing Jane Eldridge as well for the Planning Commission. Perhaps, I don't know if that's in your jurisdiction, but anyways, when we're talking about updating the codes and looking at the diagnostic review, one of the things I wanted to bring up is maybe looking at the floodplain codes. The city has great floodplain codes if they are applied correctly. And I think this county could be advantageous to update to the city standards. I understand there's going to be differences between rural and city infrastructure and the regulations that come with that. But with my experience looking at the new Boston Crossing, now 1059, one of the big problems is that the developer is able to use a CLOMAR to avoid regulations on the local level. And as we talk about data centers going forward in the future, or potential industrial and any other part of the valleys that surround us, I fear that this is going to be used again. And this can create a very dangerous precedent for us to remove floodplain on large scale for industrial or commercial development. Residential is not going to be obviously as impactful as large scale industrial or commercial. But there are lessons to be learned from what's going on in the Wakarusa River Valley right now. And I know the county has done a lot with the open space and the conservation focus on the Wakarusa Vision Plan. So I appreciate all the time and effort that's gone into that. I fear the way things have wiggled through that we might start seeing it happen in North Lawrence or Groton Township as it gets annexed by the city in the future. So I'm not sure exactly what the county can do, but there are lessons to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique. Next.
I'll go ahead and get started here. Not a lot of mumbo jumbo that Dom doesn't know, so she's being humble there. Tough act to follow. Yeah, my name is Patrick Ross, 66049. We're both heavily involved in Save the Wakarusa River Valley group in opposition to 1059. Interesting to attend the meeting on Monday that the first gentleman alluded to. And so I just wanted to highlight that organization that put that together is called Save Our Soils Kaw Valley. And it was an amazing meeting to attend, kind of terrifying, but I also learned a lot about farming. So I wanted to highlight Scotty Thelman and all of the lovely knowledge he has about the lands here and around Lawrence. And so, yeah, it sounds like this issue is going to maybe take some time for anything to really come to fruition. So I'll just sort of start by saying I think I'm in opposition to large-scale data centers and anything of that mold on prime soil and farmlands, and would really love to restore the farming production that was lost in the last few generations that Scotty highlighted at that meeting. But I'd also like to take the time tonight to address what I think is tangentially related to these and many other issues, but the concerning development within both the city and county to not reappoint what I consider to be phenomenal public servants in both Commissioner Jane Eldridge and Commissioner Chelsea Hayden. I'm very concerned that we would take maybe our best and brightest off of a board and commission that is here to service our community in ways that might present difficulties to developers bringing developments to our city and county. But to me, if you can get something past them, then I think you deserve to build something. But if you take them off and just want to rubber stamp decisions and take out critical thought, I think that's a bad way to approach things. I don't think this community would stand by that. And just because many of you know me for my poetry and artistry, I'll put it in a quick metaphor for those of you who don't understand diversity and the benefits that diversity can bring to ecosystems that I'm sure Scotty could additionally highlight. But if we were to take both of those commissioners off the Planning Commission, then it might leave Commissioner Charlie Thomas as the lone diverse member on the commission, and he might be a sunflower in the middle of the green on
That's your
hole
point.
18 at Augusta. So
Thank
thank
you.
you very much.
Anybody else? All right, seeing, oh, come on forward, Natalia.
I'm really sorry that I'm Natalia Lowther, 1480 North 1700 Road, Grant Township. I am really sorry that it looks like I'm going to be spending a lot of time in this room, although the renovation is amazing. I'm just going to do a real quick laundry list here because you're going to be seeing me again. I support reappointing Chelsea. I think something that's really important for the commission to address as part of or simultaneously with looking at these new regulations is the public process. Because the public process for the conditional use permit on the large scale solar was unmanageable, unsustainable, inhumane for both the commissioners on all of the boards involved and for the public. And I don't feel like there was space for commissioners to read and understand and have conversations with the public based on written comment, certainly not on the comment that was received in person. And so the public was very much marginalized in that process because of it all being jammed into very short time periods where there was pressure to make a decision immediately after receiving the public comment without any time for reflecting on that. I want to highlight that the Northeast Sector Plan process was entirely the opposite of that. We spent years in community meetings, talking to each other, listening, the public listening to each other and to the different stakeholders in the different aspects of that plan that we as a community made from the grassroots up for what should not be done in Grant Township. And that plan still stands. It really needs to stand through this process. There's also the Maple Grove stormwater management regulations, which need to be held up more strongly. And Pinwheel Farm is not the default stormwater detention pond for Grant Township.
Thank you, Natalia. Anybody else here? Thank you for signing in too. Anybody else in person? Going once, going twice? All right, Sarah, do we have some virtual hands?
Yes. Mike Harold, you're in the panel. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead, Mike, if you can hear us.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Fantastic. All right. So there's a few things I want to hit on. I'm going to echo a lot of sentiments here, but some things that I want to bring up weren't brought up. We're looking at a spike in energy costs due to the war with Iran. That has slowed oil supply because we do have domestic production. The actual shocks in terms of the costs have not quite hit us yet. I think they are starting to. So we're going to be looking at that. And so a prohibition would be to the community's benefit, especially given that. We're also looking at the AI bubble bursting. they're cycling billions of dollars amongst themselves. That there is not real demand. It's actually a thing where the majority of Americans hate AI. So we do not want to get left with the economic, ecological, and societal bag for having AI data centers. I'm also going to second Kincaid here, and I would go so far as to recommend that we not only prohibit, we develop a bulwark system. Let's say the state does come through and say you can't prohibit. Cool. We go through and we create contradictory codes and make it effectively a thing where each code makes it impossible, and they have to go through and dismantle that. Even if the AI data centers never show up here, us doing that gives blueprints to other communities that want to do something, but do not feel as emboldened as we do to do something. You guys sound like you're opposed to bringing AI data centers here. I thank you for that. I celebrate you for that. And I'm very appreciative of you guys having that energy. And that's all from me.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else, Sarah?
No, that's it.
Okay. That will conclude our general public comment. Thank you, everybody, for showing up and sharing your thoughts with us. We welcome any further comments you have to send us otherwise. With that, we will move into our regular business agenda. Item 4.1 is a 2027 budget preview. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Sarah.
Yeah, I can start things, commissioners, while Brooke comes forward. We have a small presentation prepared for you, and we're going to try to keep it moving tonight, even though both Brooke and I could talk forever about budget, if you let us. Really, this is just a broad preview to get some feedback from the commissioners as we go through the process. We have already solicited requests from community partners. I'm about 2/3 or half through my hearings with them, and departments are in the we're submitting their budgets this week. So we are still very early in the process, and many things can change. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Brooke.
Thank you, Sarah, and good evening, commissioners. Staff is very excited to come before you tonight with the 2027 budget preview. We'll begin with our budget priorities, which will guide our work for the 2027 budget process. First, the focus will remain on maintaining and sustaining existing services with rising operational costs. As demands on the county systems grow, the costs of providing those services continues to increase, and our goal is to ensure that essential programs remain stable, reliable, and accessible to the community. Second, significant investment is being directed towards the county workforce. This includes strengthening compensation and continuing our efforts to recruit and retain talented employees. Third, health and human services continue to be a priority with a particular emphasis on the behavioral health programs and housing stability. And last but not least, finally, we want to invest in our local infrastructure readiness. This involves early planning and significant capital needs on the horizon. It ensures that we continue operating our facilities and infrastructure in a good way. Together, these priorities are going to reflect a balanced approach, supporting the workforce, sustaining essential services, strengthening community well-being, and planning responsibly for our future infrastructure needs. Commissioners, over the last decade, Douglas County has experienced a pretty steady growth in assessed value, which this chart shows. It averages 6.3% per year if we consider the 10-year span. When the window is narrowed to 5 years, the average increases to 8.1%. For the upcoming 2026 tax year, which supports our 2027 budget, preliminary data indicates that we may see a 4% value growth. This represents a pretty notable slowdown compared to recent years and marks the lowest growth rate since 2021. While the county is still anticipating growth, the more moderate rate, it reflects a cooling down of the market after several years of higher than average increases. The next chart, within that same time frame that we experienced a growth in assessed value, the county's mill levy has undergone a significant shift, moving from a period of gradual increases to a sustained and meaningful reduction. Beginning in 2022, the mill levy moved into a steady downward trend. This represents a reduction of 6.75 mills from the peak in 2021. An overall decrease of about 14.2% over a 4-year span. It should also be noted that the county assumed a 2.5% delinquency rate to support the 2026 budget, down from 5% the prior year. This delinquency rate is included in the mill levy rate shown on this slide. By comparison, the delinquency rate for the 2024 tax year, so that supported our 2025 budget last year, was 1%. The delinquency rate for the current year will be finalized after the last distribution is made in ad valorem taxes later this year. I think that's September. Moving along to revenues, I'd like to take a deeper dive into some of the major revenue sources other than ad valorem tax realized by the county. The first one I'll focus on is our general county sales tax, which is a 1% sales tax. So I want to say county sales tax is collected at a total rate of 1.25%. So on this slide, I'm just going to focus on that 1%. This was a sales tax measure passed in 1995. So the way that this particular tax is distributed, a portion of the revenue is sent to counties and cities. To decide how much each community receives, the state uses a formula that is designated to reflect both how many people live in each community and how much each community contributes in property taxes. They then will calculate a ratio, and then that ratio is used to make the distribution of this general use sales tax. It also considers both service demand, population, and then local funding effort, which is the property tax portion of that ratio. Based on the current ratios, for every dollar that is collected, the city of Lawrence receives about 58 cents. The county receives about 36 cents. Eudora receives 4, City of Baldwin City 3, and Lecompton receives a much smaller, a fraction of a penny. These numbers represent each community's final percentage of the total general sales tax amount returned to Douglas County from the state. For the county share, sales tax collection shows a steady climb from 2017 through 2019, which you can see on this chart, with an annual increase in the 1% to 3% range. Then in 2020, we see a slight dip, aligning with pandemic-related economic slowdown. And then beginning in 2021, the data shows a major surge. Collections jumped nearly 13% in 2021, and then another 11% in 2022, the strongest growth shown for that entire period. This does reflect that strong post-pandemic recovery. And then you'll see after 2022, the growth kind of levels off. We're seeing increases roughly around 4%. 2024 is almost flat with less than 1% growth. And that, again, signaling a return to a more normalized and stable trend. Looking ahead, the estimates for 2025 through 2027 show very minimal year-to-year changes. There's a small bump in 2026 tied to anticipated World Cup activity, but overall the pattern flattens out with a slight dip in 2027. From 2017 to 2027, so this 10-year period, collections rise from roughly $7.2 million to around $10.1 million. That's a 41% increase seen in that 10-year span.
Brooke, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, I'm sorry. From 2017 through 2027, we rose from $7.2 million to around $10.1 million. And that's a 41% increase.
And Brooke, that's just the county's portion?
Yes, that is just the county's
36%
portion.
of the 1%.
You've got it.
Got it, thanks.
Yep. So we see modest growth, a pandemic dip, a sharp rebound, and then now we're seeing some stabilization in the collections. Now I'll turn our focus on the 0.25% or quarter cent county sales tax. This sales tax is distributed a little bit differently. The county realizes the whole portion of this collection. We began with a partial year of collections in 2019. I think our first month realized was April in that year. We totaled about $3.3 million for sales tax collections that year. And again, you can see similar trends. The first full year of collections was in 2020. It rose to $5.1 million. And then from 21 to 22, revenues continue that strong upward trend that was also seen on the sales tax side. And then again, in 2023, the pace of growth starts to level out. That indicates that the fund is really transitioning into a stable and mature pattern of sales tax collections for the period. Looking ahead, staff applied the same forecasting logic used for the 1% general tax, which includes a small adjustment in 2026 for World Cup. But in 2027, as estimates take a slight dip, coming in at 7.14 million, signaling a return to more baseline values. The chart on this slide reflects investment income over the last 10 years, along with projections through 2026 and 2027. From 2017 through 2022, investment income was relatively modest, ranging from about $400,000 per year to just over $1 million annually. Beginning in 2023, interest earnings increased significantly due to changes made to the county's demand deposit and savings accounts, which were restructured to earn interest in the form of cash, and higher earnings from our long and short-term maturities, along with the county's investment in the Kansas Municipal Investment Pool. These are shown on separate lines inside the county's budget. Specific to the changes made to our on-demand deposit accounts, earnings jumped from $621 in 2022 to $144,000 the following year. Cash earnings for that DDA and savings account continued to grow, reaching $540,000 in 2024 and $442,000 in 2025. Considering all investments, interest income climbed to approximately $4.6 million in 2023, and then doubled again in 2024 after we made some of those changes. We really started realizing more of those interest earnings. For 2025 through 2027, returns are projected to kind of level off. Although interest rates are expected to moderate, the investment portfolio is positioned to maintain steady earnings. These projections that can be refined during the budget development process, but they provide a solid outlook on both recent performance and what lies ahead. It's also important to note that interest for most of the county's investment accounts is realized at the end of the year, around November, December, as those investments mature. The current average rate across the portfolio as it stands today is 3.8%. Overall, this reflects favorable market conditions and disciplined strategic investment management.
Brooke, I have a question about that. I guess I was expecting to see that investment income drop pretty dramatically as we've stood up the public safety building and the building next door? Because we've spent down the cash that was also part of what was held as an investment.
We are still spending down cash. We still have a significant portion of cash on hand. Again, this is something that we will continue to develop as we work through the budget process. These are very preliminary numbers. Staff has worked,
Yeah, we put 20 million in cash towards that project. We have a $190 million budget. So it'll go down some, but we still have a very strong cash position.
Didn't you get all the bond money at once, so up front?
Yep. And so that's
No,
gonna
that-
be part of this spike
Yeah.
that's in here right now and that money's flying out the door.
Absolutely. Commissioners, the fund balances shown on this slide are calculated by dividing the current year's actual fund balance, so we knew what we came into the year with, by the corresponding values listed on the budget certificate page of our certified budget file with the state office. The general fund maintained fund balance of 24% moving into 2026. Maintaining a fund balance of at least 20% helps ensure that the county has flexibility to respond if the economy shifts or if unexpected events occur. The Road and Bridge Fund begins the year with a 28% balance. The Employee Benefits Fund started 2026 at 33%. And while those percentages look strong at the start of the year, the fund is under pressure. We talked about this, I think, last month. We are experiencing a challenging plan year with higher than usual claims. We also implemented an intentional revenue reduction and will implement increased employer contribution rates beginning June 1st of this year. Because of these combined factors, we do expect that the fund balance will decline. It may reach a point where additional funding is needed for the 2027 budget. Once staff has updated data from open enrollment, which just closed last week, maybe the week before, staff will take another look at those estimates and provide an updated report with the 2027 recommended budget. The Motor Vehicle Operating Fund starts the year with a 34% balance. Even so, we continue to see a widening gap between what it costs to provide the state mandated service and the revenues that come in to support it. The only reason that fund remains stable is because the general fund helps cover those operational costs. Finally, the quarter-cent behavioral health sales tax fund, this supports the treatment and recovery center, begins 2026 with a 69% fund balance. This fund acts as a hybrid fund because it supports both operating and debt service or capital replacements. Because the fund supports ongoing capital needs for a 24,000 square foot campus, the balance carried from year to year is intentionally higher than other funds. Overall, these fund balances reflect both our current financial position and the pressures ahead as we continue planning for our 2027 budget year. Commissioners, on this slide, staff wanted to highlight major budgeted fund transfers for each year. Transfers that support the county's capital planning efforts are transferred to Ambulance Capital Reserve, Capital Improvement Projects Fund, and the Equipment Reserve Fund. These transfers really allow us to plan ahead for equipment replacements from everything from vehicles, heavy equipment, operational tools. And I think with the Capital Improvement Plan Fund transfer, it's really important to note that transfer has been adjusted for inflation in previous budget years. This can be reconsidered each year as we make budget adjustments. All of those transfers work together to ensure that capital expenditures are anticipated, funded, managed without creating sudden impacts on our operating budget in the general fund. Staff evaluated general fund capital expenditures last year, and they were around 1%. We do not run capital through the general fund. Next is the sales tax transfer. This totals $4.75 million. This transfer is outlined in the ballot measure of that 1% sales tax that we just talked about on a previous slide. And it reflects only general use sales tax funds received by the county. It is dedicated to debt service, helping the county meet its long-term financial obligations on major capital projects. We also have a transfer to the mental health sales tax fund, also referred to as the Behavioral Health Projects Fund, at $5.4 million. This general fund transfer is supported by property taxes that were used before the behavioral health sales tax measure was approved to support that service. That allocation was specifically made for Behavioral Health Partners, Burton Ash, and there's one other, and I can't remember what it is right now off the top of my head. This is a blended purpose transfer that supports both operating needs in that fund and then those capital investments that I talked about. And they're specifically related to those behavioral health services. And then finally, we've got our work comp fund transfer on here. This fund provides essential support for county-wide operations by ensuring that we can meet our work comp claims obligations. And that work comp fund transfer is analyzed each year and can be modified based on the prior year's claims experience. Commissioners, we've talked a lot about the quarter-cent behavioral health sales tax fund, and then we just talked about the transfer of funds from the general fund, which is supported by county property taxes. This slide compares the total sales tax revenue and property tax support shown on that blue line with operating expenses in the behavioral health fund shown on that pink line. With the Treatment Recovery Center becoming operational in 2023, operating expenses increased accordingly. Sales tax revenue demonstrates a steady upward trend, as we just spoke about, increasing from just over 6.6 million in 23 to more than 7.1 million in 2026. Again, property tax support continues to be a major ongoing revenue source, totaling just over 5.4 million and remaining at that level. Operating expenses, as you can see here, rise sharply starting in 2024 as programming really began to ramp up at the Treatment Recovery Center and we became fully operational. By 2024, expenses in this fund exceed $11 million annually, and that level continues into the 2026 budget. This increase does reflect the full operational costs, as I said. The key takeaway from this chart is that while sales tax revenue continues to grow, it is not sufficient on its own to cover the total costs of services that are being provided in this fund. Property taxes are required to meet those service delivery needs. Commissioners, in July, and along with your proposed budget in June, you're going to see a number of supplemental requests. Currently, departments are still in the process of submitting their budgets. And what you see on this slide are the supplemental requests that we have received so far for community partners. I want to also caveat that these numbers are changing as we're meeting with those community partners and we are asking for revisions. So, but as it stood last Thursday when we submitted this agenda item report, these were the numbers that we had. I think it's also important to note here that approximately 4.4 million of that 6.9 million up there is eligible for funding through the Behavioral Health Sales Tax Fund. As part of our standard budget development process, staff conducts a full review of each of these requests, and each request is rated using a 3-tier system designed to help align funding decisions with board priorities, organizational capacity, and available funding streams. High-rated requests demonstrate clear board priorities, representing one-time funding needs, and show evidence of braided funding or a diversified funding stream. Medium rated requests are generally strong proposals, but they may reflect a departure from established priorities or may be tied to state or federal funding fluctuations. Low rated requests are typically those that are not recommended due to concerns. Either there's a lack of rated funding or questions about the organization's capacity to deliver the project or the program that is being recommended. These ratings help us ensure that our recommendations are both strategic and sustainable, and that we support partners in a way that aligns with county stated goals. Commissioners, I'm not going to read this line for line, but staff wanted to provide you with a budget timeline so that you know what to expect for the upcoming budget cycle. Again, this is the budget book layout. You've had some time to read this. On the last slide, staff has some questions for commission, some policy direction for feedback.
And I can maybe take it from here, Brooke?
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Sarah.
So commissioners, in the past, your direction to me has been to prepare a flat mill levy budget. So one of the things I want to check in with you today is if that's the direction you want us to continue, or if you want to look at something different. If we were to prepare a revenue neutral budget, it would require cuts to the organization. And I would rather be talking about how to approach those cuts here in May than I would be on July 6th. So I'm looking for some direction from the commission about that. As commissioners know, as we go through the budget process, we routinely identify areas of savings, cost efficiency, effectiveness, programs that are discontinued. We factor that into our reestimate and into the building process moving forward. We're going to try this year to highlight that a little bit more towards you, but that all goes into the process of preparing the proposed budget. And then really the other things are really just if you want to see anything different than what you've had in the past. Do you want to see something different in the book? Do you want more of something, less of something else? We are not anticipating major changes to the book outlined this year, unless there's things the commissioners are looking for, or to the format of our meetings and review. So with that, we would open it up to feedback from the commission.
Thank you, Sarah and Brooke. Commissioners, questions? Oh, no question.
We nailed it.
Dive into very thorough. I really do appreciate the overview. I think we've had meetings similar to this pre-budget, but I think this is a little bit more fleshed out and does give a good outline of what we're looking at, and appreciate all of the historical context about how we've seen things spike and drop and start to level out. I do think that's important context for us, certainly, and for the public too.
I have comments, not questions.
Yeah. Yep. I'm sure we all have comments. I just want to check in though, and just process wise and make sure that we address any questions specifically.
Do we want to take public comment before we make comments, or do we want to just jump right into comments?
Well, yeah, we usually do questions and then public comment and then discussion amongst the commission. So I feel a little inclined to follow that process. But we make up the rules here, so I'm okay with a little bit more of a fluid conversation if commissioners are.
I'll ask a question that gives us some time to think about that. So of the four kind of priorities that were outlined, and one of them was investing in the county workforce, which a couple of years ago we did a pretty thorough reevaluation of our compensation package compared to surrounding communities and made a significant change. We're not looking at that. We're just continuing to kind of honor the commitments that were made within those levels, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioners, each year, the county has taken a practice of developing a market-based increase instead of a cost of living-based increase. We use analytical studies from the Kansas City region by job, family, and type that tell us what regionally is happening for attorneys, what's regionally happening for highway workers, what's regionally happening for correctional officers. And we use that study to prepare information that you all get that has a different percentage increase based off off of the particular job family. So that's what we call our market-based increase. Then we talk about if we have capacity to do a merit pool on top of that. This is the last part of the budget process that I put together. Commissioners get a full outline of what that market adjustment is by job family and then what various increase levels are for the merit, 1%, 2%, 3%, whatever we up there. And then I will make a recommendation for the proposed budget. But you have full transparency on what the total cost of that increase is for the organization as a whole. Does that answer your question?
It does very much. And you saying that that's kind of the last piece of the budget, I assume ties into, are we asking for a flat mill levy recommendation from you, which is what we have always asked for and gotten. And then we've made our own adjustments, including the significant decreases in mill levy that we've done the last few years, but we've started from that flat mill levy.
Correct. And then on your list of supplemental requests, you see a full outline of what that cost is. So if commissioners want to see something different in that space, you've got that full transparency into that number.
I have a question about the community partner requests and supplemental requests. And, you know, in recent years, a year over year, I think it's been true that we've had more requests that specifically speak to cost of living increases and requests related specifically to that. And those requests have looked really different. Some of them have just been a, you know, simple sort of line explaining that inflation sucks and we're feeling it basically. And then some of them have really detailed out, you know, how they are calculating that within their own budgets and where their requests has come from. And it all to say that we as a commission, and I think probably is true for staff too, have struggled with how to address that. So I'm anticipating that that's going to be a continuous theme of requests we're getting this year. And I guess my question for staff is, as this conversation has sort of evolved and we've not really come to many good, solid conclusions about how to frame out those types of requests, I'm curious if staff has any thoughts that they want to articulate or that have clarified anything about how you all are approaching those conversations in this current season of working on those agreements with, or working on those proposals with folks, and how you're sort of framing the conversation around any supplemental requests that are specific to cost of living increases, you know, inflationary increases versus new programming, new projects, or something more concrete.
Well, knock on wood, so far this year with community partners, I think we are making some progress in that sense. And I think community partners are trying to be a lot more specific in what it is that they're funding and what they're identifying for. Commissioners, you know, we are trying to, when I look at my proposed budget, with the small exception of the Extension Council, I do not put increases for community partners inside my proposed budget. I believe that if it is a policy decision of the Board of County Commissioners that if you want to expand a service that might require additional tax revenue, that it is up to the board to make those decisions. So I very kindly and gently tell community partners, it's not that I don't like them, it's just that I don't consider it my role to fund them in the request, but you see every request that comes to staff. I take a different approach related to cost of living adjustments for internal departments. Since you all give me scope of responsibility on some of those things, we're not able to fund them all, but if I can fund small, increases in software costs, increases in utilities, increases in, commodity costs for public works, we try to accommodate those inside our proposed budget. I'm not always successful. You do see supplemental requests from departments related to cost of living. And obviously, if it was a service expansion like additional staff, you would see that coming from departments as well. So I think we're making some progress, but you're still going to see some this year as you come through. I do think the commission is getting some, you are making progress in that sense with them. Some services are more vendor-like in terms of what you are paying for and what those costs are. And some are less so. And those partners may have the ability to get braided funding, to go to other partners and leverage additional funding. And that's really what I think is the beauty of our relationship with community partners, is that we are not their only source of funding, that they can go to their state, their federal, their foundations, their grants, their city partners, and potentially get additional funds. And we want to leverage those dollars to what the county invests. So, I think some of them are turning to that avenue, and then sometimes that's helpful for us to know as they approach us. It was a long-winded answer, but hopefully it helps.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Any other questions come to mind, commissioners?
This is maybe too broad of a question, but in our 4 priorities there, and the top one is sustaining existing services, and the majority of what counties are tasked with is public safety related. But we also have rising costs, and that's mentioned in there too. Are there any kind of pain points that you see coming down the pike in terms of being able to sustain those existing services?
I don't believe so at this point under a flat levy. If I were asked to do a revenue neutral budget, yes. But under a flat levy, I think we're going to be okay.
Commissioner Kelly, I've personally thought more about your question. And I think that, especially given that this is informational purposes only, there's no action to be taken on this. This is a discussion by nature that I think comments from commissioners now before public comment is perfectly appropriate and acceptable. So if there are certainly questions and comments at this time before we open it up for public comments. So Commissioner Dorsey, I know you had a comment queued up.
Random things. I'd like to see a definition of what can go in the behavioral health and the mental health sales tax fund. I think we've kind of flown by the seat of our pants on that in past years. And I'd like a more developed definition so we know what should go in there.
I think we could certainly bring back to the commission staff could work on a draft and bring it back to the commission for consideration but knowing that any future commission can modify that, how that use happens in future budget years.
The other thing I'd like to see is, and maybe Brooke defined it, but I'd like to see a definition of high, medium, and low that I can read before I start through the budget book, just to get a feel. And I suspect some groups, based on the definitions she gave, don't fit into the way we fund them in the past.
Well, here's what I'd say. You do get a copy of what that is. We can certainly give it to you further in advance in the budget book. It's in the budget book every year. As I've tell community partners, when staff rates them, you guys probably ignore me about 50% of the time. And that's okay. Commissions have different priorities than where staff does. This is how staff evaluates the request, and commissioners can take any one of those requests and fund them. I've seen lows get funded and I've seen highs not get funded. So it's really up to the commission as to your own individual perspectives on how that evaluation should go. But we can certainly get it to you further in advance. And if you'd like us to rate it differently, I'm open to those ideas. I just would like to get them pretty quickly.
I provided a rubric and rating template if we wanted to take a look at that, based on the low, medium, high scoring. So it's something for us to evaluate in the next couple of weeks if that's something that we would like to look at. So based on the 44 requests, are all of those requests from Douglas County, or any of them outside of the county?
They're only from inside the county.
Okay, all right. And then I believe, Brooke, I heard you say that of the 6.9 million, 4.9 million are eligible for the behavioral health tax. Is that what I heard?
As of where we stand right now, things are still in flux.
Okay, so then approximately 2 million of those community requests are not eligible for the behavioral health tax?
Correct.
Okay, so then to Commissioner Dorsey's ask, The rubric that you will be providing, the low, medium, high, I believe I also heard you say, Brooke, that they are also related to goals. Will the rubric itself also be matched or aligned to the particular goals that staff has also been reviewing and like matching or correlating them to the various goals so we understand how staff sees that relating to the overall work? I mean, I know we don't have like a strategy per se, but how it's relating to the overall work?
Not necessarily, because they are so widely different. I mean, I view that your strategic document is the budget. It is everything from tax collection to historical societies to aggregate to the register of deeds, from elections to back around again to emergency communications to jails. So all of those things are your goals and your priorities. So we say it is consistent with existing Board of County Commissioners and existing county efforts and initiatives. So if it is something we've never done before, it's probably not going to be rated high. Does that make sense? But those 4 goals are very narrow in focus. We don't necessarily say if it's related to historical societies, which was not listed in that goal, that it's going to be a low. Does that make sense?
Okay, but if it is related to out of the 44 requests, if it's related to a place for everyone, will it be matched up or aligned to a particular?
We've never gone into that level of detail of trying to outline what specific programs and projects it's aligned to. I mean, and I'd say we got a lot of work going on this time of year. So to try to inventory that on every request, if that's what the commission wants, we'll do it. But I'd actually like, it's going to be, we would have to think about how to make that happen here in 27.
Something I might say in response to that, Commissioner Anderson, is I think that's work for us and it's work for community partners more than it is for staff, actually. So on the front end of things, community partners being clear in their requests and understanding the fuller context of county priorities and how and where they fit into those priorities and specific plans we might be, we have adopted or are working through, such as a place for everyone, any of the, CHIP planks, open space plan, those things. I think that the onus is on community partners to understand the landscape well enough to know where they are aligning, and the pre-budget meetings that they're having with staff, I think helps facilitate that to a point. But in terms of staff sort of drawing those lines or making those connections for them, in my opinion, that's a place I want to be mindful to keep some guardrails up around what their processes are, because then when those, as Sarah has pointed out, all the supplemental requests, every request comes before us, right? And we can say yes, or we can say no, or we can say something else. And specifically all those community partner hearings and requests that we go through, it's, in my opinion, and like, that's a part of the deliberative process, is for us to determine whether or not the request we got draws that picture clearly and tells us how they fit into our county priorities and how they understand what their role is in providing a service or programming or whatnot. And then for us to discern whether or not we think that that's true and appropriate or sufficient enough to make an investment in, if that helps you think about the sort of sequencing of that conversation, in my opinion.
Being that staff has already rated them low, medium, or high, do we not think that they are then one of the subject matter experts in the conversation with the community partner then to weigh, since they're already in the process of weighing in, that they should, because they're providing guidance to the commission, that they should also say, well, we also believe that it fits into this particular bucket, being that staff is potentially at any given time working with community partners, and or if it's a new community partner, they will be onboarding them and working with that particular community partner for the next year in that particular lane, whether it be a place for everyone or, Bob working with familiar faces. And so I would think that staff would then, as they're rating low, medium, high, also state that it is a part of a particular plank, or it is, a part of a place for everyone's strategy, because you're already weighing in on that particular applicant's application.
I mean, what I would say, Commissioner, is almost all of the requests are related to something somehow, somewhere.
But isn't that the point? Because you want it to be. I mean, you want it to be
Right.
integrated.
So then how
you
do I
want it to
use it
have
as a
some sort of an
definer?
applicability to the overall work. So I would think that staff would, since they're giving us a rating, that they would also let us know what it is aligned to, even if it's aligned to multiple areas.
So then everything's aligned. So how do I use that as a discerning criteria? If it's related to something, is it automatically a high? Because then they're all highs.
I don't
So
know.
I would say no. I mean, and that's not how we've looked at it in the past. We can certainly try to highlight it, Commissioner, but I can't say that I'm going to have a comprehensive inventory of every plan that a request could be related to. But we can try to highlight the things that come to top of mind if that is sufficient for the staff. I just don't want to be accused or have to be comprehensive in that analysis. I mean, I can tell you, I know we've gotten one request that I don't see related to anything that we've currently done. So to me, that would be a low, and we would say, because it isn't aligned with BOCC existing priorities. But is there somewhere, some plan that it might have been, I'm not aware of, and it wasn't outlined in the request? Is that helpful?
I mean, it is, yeah, because I'm just kind of curious as to how staff also spends their time too. And so is it, is something low, medium, or high because it is built into their portfolio of work? Or is something low, medium, or high because it is absolutely a priority of the overarching body of work for the commission because it's going to meet a particular goal?
It's not about individual staff. It's not rated high, medium, and low because an individual staff person thinks it's a good idea. We meet as a team. I do retain some final control as it is my proposed budget. We do have robust and vigorous discussion, and staff sometimes feel different ways about certain things. So ultimately, it is not just because, Sean likes it, and that's why it got a high. That's not how we do it.
Well, and I wasn't meaning that because Sean likes it, but if it's because of their portfolio, so then what is it aligned to? And so when we think about outcomes and metrics, and so why, so back to Commissioner Dorsey asking, what are the particulars as far as low, medium, or high, the things that are actually getting rated low, medium, and high. So I think that's where we really get into the nuance about why something is low, medium, and high so that we can truly understand how it fits into the overall picture, how it fits into the vision of the work that we're doing, whether it be through the remainder of 26, 27, because we know that many of these community partners have been with us for many years and have been receiving funding. And so what are the outcomes? How are they being sustained? And how are they really driving and moving this work as we continue down this journey with them?
We'll give you
stabilizing our
Yeah,
population.
I'll give you that listing that we used that Brooke said out loud. You all, if you decide you want to use something different, you can give us direction in the next couple of weeks to provide us with more information related to that. I just don't want to put too much pressure on this because it is only our opinion on that. I mean, the commission has and should have the ability to overrule us on this. It is your recommendation. It is not mine. I'm also nervous about rating too many things high that I know you can't afford. So at a certain point, those are policy decisions I think what Commissioner Reed was trying to say is how much you want to pay for is up to you. It's not up to me. So if I rate everything high, I'm not helping you in that sense, and I'm not telling you have to pay for it. So I just want to be really clear about, and for several years, we didn't rate them at all. And we just gave them to you blank.
And we gave you our thoughts maybe, but we didn't necessarily do high, medium, and low. But
I think that's been a help, the high, medium, and low. And I know that there's often frustration at staff that we don't necessarily follow that with what we choose of our, but we're five individuals that have 5 different ways of evaluating community need and the proposals that come before us, and like what our priorities for, mill levy reduction or budget overall. So and that's, I think, it's a pretty scary process and also a really valuable process when each of us kind of take what we've read in the budget book, asked of staff, had meetings with the community partners and our offices, and then come back and on your own you have to figure out what are my priorities with it, and then we all come back together and we share those thought processes and that information. And I think it's a pretty unique process. I think it's really valuable, and it's messy because we are all really different, and that's one of the things that I think I've learned through conversations with other commissioners and the work that we do up here, is like how different we really are, and how differently we process information and want to see our priorities for our community put forth in the budget. So I'm glad to have the high, medium, and low, because it's a starting point for where I ask my questions, and I may end up at a different spot, and often do, but I'd be a little afraid of having too much that felt really regimented, where we felt pressured to fund the things that were rated high in your recommended budget, or pressure to not give. I feel like this is a pretty good balance of giving us some direction and some thought from our professional staff, but also giving us kind of the freedom and the mission to dive into it on our own and keep learning things. So I've liked this process in terms of what information we get from staff, and having still some really robust, and I'm sure it will be, a fun and interesting discussion when we do budget again this year too. So it's a long way to say I'm happy with the amount of information, the process that we get for the ratings at this point.
I got one thing I forgot about a while ago regarding the opioid and special alcohol tax funds. We said we would do that as part of the budget. I think you indicated you might say which fund this is eligible for, but also there could be projects that aren't submitted as a supplemental that could still be a valid project for one of those 2 funds. I know when we had the list earlier, it was pretty much just opioid funds and nothing for special alcohol. So I think there should be some mechanism for a group to bring forward a unique project that might fit one of those that's not in their regular budget submission.
they do that, and we outlined that to them up front, that if they wanted to make application to those funds, they could. Just to remind commissioners, you've only got about $200,000 in the alcohol fund and $400,000 in the opioid fund, and you have 20 million in the behavioral health fund that could pay for any of those items. So, our primary concern is the behavioral health fund and one-time resources for those one-time funding sources.
But that's why we need a definition.
Yeah, and it will definitely give you, we'll give you, but I believe anything that is allowable from those 2 funds would be allowable from the behavioral health fund.
Commissioners, just some comments going back to the high, medium, and low. Oftentimes I find my experience has been that that's helpful in asking questions of staff, because the supplemental request is the narrative that was provided by the community partner. Sometimes in visiting with staff on why it's low, I find that there's an underlying thing that's happening there that maybe wasn't communicated in the supplemental request. I really see that as a point to start a dialogue with staff. If you rated it so high, why did you rate this so high? And, to Commissioner Willie's point, I agree that each one of us has a different set of values and has a different way of approaching and the things that are important to us and the people that we represent. And so I want to use that lens as openly as possible. But I really see that starting place of high, medium, and low as a way to dig deep into it. We have some requests that have come from supplemental partners that aren't fully hatched out. And sometimes when I visit with staff, it wasn't, their application looked good and they could tie it to a place for everyone or our comprehensive plan or whatever that is. But then when I visit with staff, I understand like they may have some other funding sources that are coming on, and that wasn't listed in their application. And I think that then gives me some questions to ask to the community partner when they come forward. I appreciate that ability to sort of discover it on my own around the questions that I have and the values that I have. So I like the high, medium, and low. I hear, maybe more of it seems like there's some desire from some commissioners to have a little more definition than we currently have. But I'm going to hesitate, and I'm not totally against that, but I'm going to hesitate of giving too prescriptive on that because I think, it could be that we start to get supplemental requests that are written to the rubric instead of to where we think they can best serve our community.
When I talk with community partners, which I try and talk with them like throughout the year, so it's not like all focused on budget when everything's, there's so much to read and do and think about. And I tell them like, here's what I would recommend, which is make sure that you tie, your request back to priorities of the county, documents that we've adopted, tell us the story in language we understand, which I think that just makes their request more powerful. And I also tell them that like from my perspective, and we've seen this maybe echoed by commissioners too, like really like to see the braided funding. So like talk to me about like how these are leveraging other dollars. So those are kind of specific things that I've said back to community partners. And it's still their story to tell. And some of them still won't. Like they kind of still march to their own beat or drum and don't necessarily want to tie it into some of our larger adopted plans and such. But they get to tell the story how they want to. But this is what I say is I think is helpful for me.
Commissioners, I think it's, to me, one of the most important questions that staff have asked us for feedback, probably the most important question for us to get clear about with each other is whether or not staff is being directed to prepare a flat mill levy budget, as has been historically true. My position is that, yes, I think that's what we should maintain, and that process has worked well for us, and that this commission in the past several years especially has been able to identify opportunities to drive the mill levy down in meaningful ways when we have the capacity to do so. I think having staff start at a flat mill levy and maintaining services as they are with that, and seeing what room what room of growth exists that we can deal with and determine how we think it's most important to address that growth and invest it or otherwise. So my position is that we should keep that as is, and that it's, I think, most helpful for staff to be able to start there instead of thinking about how to cut. I do not like us starting a conversation from a place of a deficit perspective.
Echo it and modify a little bit that I like getting the recommended budget from staff at the flat mill levy, but also when when you help us identify areas where we may be able to have some accommodations for lowering mill levy that have the least impact on these other priorities we've had. So I like the help with that also, but to start with that flat mill levy budget makes me comfortable, and we of course have the ability to raise the mill levy, lower the mill levy, and that's a part of the community conversation that people want to have with us and that we have, but that's my comfort anyway.
Yeah, I think staff asks a very important question here because I mean, based on the data that we're given today, this is a significant decrease in our valuations. I was trying to think back to a past time on the commission when we saw such a low increase, and so I personally am still concerned that in order to meet all the needs we'll have for the community, cuts are still going to be necessary. So I would say to Sarah, like, I want you to prepare a flat mill levy, and I want you to be thinking about what cuts we might need to make, because at these levels, I think it's going to be hard just with the overall cost that we're having. We heard Commissioner Reed talk about just the cost of living. Fuel costs are going up. We've seen that significantly. I don't know how long they'll stay that way, but I think I want a little bit of both, Sarah, as a flat mill levy, and then where might we cut? I do think we have some opportunities in that behavioral health budget, and I think Commissioner Dorsey, I heard you mention that earlier. I want to make sure that we've fully thought through those requests. If you remember, one of the reasons I visited with Sarah about this earlier this week, because I said that fund balance seems very high to me, and she was kind enough to remind me about our conversation last year of, did we want to create a capital fund for it, or did we want to keep it there? And I think that's something we need to keep thinking about long term when we think about the cost of behavioral health in the state of Kansas. What might be funded from the state, what might not be funded from the state, and the additional costs, as we've heard about from Bert Nash, on some of those things. I think those are evolving. If we move so many things out of behavioral health, move so many things off of property tax, we may be able to do that. But by moving them off of property tax, we're hitting that, we're burning our savings, right? And I just want us to be cautious of that. So in that way, that's my answer. And I just want us to be prepared that I'm expecting this budget time to be tough. And not, you look at these charts, and I just had to Google, like, how much did we get in the CARES Act? And it was $1,200 per taxpayer that came from the federal government. And you can follow that line in growth to 1 year later, it happened to investments. It moved down the line. And I think those years of those big jumps, I'm not sure they're going to continue.
Commissioners, I thank you for saying that. You have had the distinct privilege of the last several years of being able to expand services in this community at a level that is probably unprecedented and lower the mill levy. I think those days are over.
And I had asked Sarah today, like, what opportunities do we have around pilots? And so payment in lieu of taxes. And I know that Commissioner Willie, you've been engaged in some really great conversations with KUIP, and that update is coming soon. So I really look forward to hearing what that would look like. But then I also asked her, what other opportunities do we have that we could explore as a commission? Because we do have, I believe, unprecedented cost of living increases coming. We do know that our nonprofits are not going to be able to sustain. And so many of them may need to consider integration within their own duplications that they see. And those are very uncomfortable conversations, very hard conversations to have, and to determine what that looks like across the county, knowing that we have some of the highest nonprofit numbers in the state of Kansas. And so that those levels of support may not be something that can be sustained. And so how do we support them as they have these difficult conversations? Even when it comes to skill building and capacity, so that they do find some sort of a level ground and don't just feel like they're drowning as they're trying to figure things out if their funder is no longer able to fund at the capacity level that they had experienced before. And so absolutely in favor of Sarah looking at what opportunities we do have for future revenue. And then as you look at pilots, payment in lieu of taxes, but then supporting staff and taking a look at what does advocacy look like, and then what does it look like if there are other ways for revenue, and then what cuts could possibly happen as you prepare a flat mill levy budget. And then is it possible also when I think about all the different corporations that I have worked for, as an employee that has, for the most part, always been rated exceptional. I mean, we just have never received anything over 3%. And so, we also may just need to look at a 3% raise too. And so what would that look like for employees to receive a 3% raise? And then those that are absolutely exceptional, taking a look at, maybe something a little bit more. But I mean, it's just very unheard of, some of the raises and merit-based increases that our county staff has actually been receiving over the years. And that's something really, really nice that the county has actually been able to provide, but I don't really think that it is sustainable.
I'll just give you a personal comment. I live in a 50s rancher. My valuation went up 6.8% this year. Now the average is 4, which means some people are getting 0 and some are getting 8 probably. But I don't have any problem paying my property taxes. But if I was trying to exist on just Social Security and my valuation goes up 6.8%, and Social Security only goes up 3%, with a flat mill levy, I'm already in the hole. And so then I got to choose between paying my property tax and buying medicine or getting my car repaired or something else, especially if I'm old and on a fixed income. So I just like everybody to keep that in mind too.
I would remind your commissioners to be thinking about that. When I meet with community partners, I tell them that. And then they come to you and that's part of the problem here of, I can't wait. You don't want me to eliminate any of these. I make your job harder because I know how you're trying to balance the tax rate and requests, but they're going to ask. They will ask you because there's no harm in asking. So it is up to you all when you meet with them in July to keep that at the front of your mind and also to say it to them because, and so I'm not the only Debbie Downer in the world on that stuff.
And I know that you communicate that to partners on our behalf. I know that they often don't believe you and they come forward anyway with $6.9 million in supplemental requests. But I would just reiterate it from here that I don't think that we will be looking at supporting a lot of supplemental requests this year. I don't see that us being able to do that. So just kind of setting the expectation that what Sarah told you is probably true, that this is going to be a tough year for supplemental requests. My guess.
Commissioners, I'm going to move us on to other questions that staff asked for feedback. One is any additional budget sessions or meetings. And so in looking at the dates, and I did want to point out, I talked to Sarah about this briefly earlier, there's a bit of a discrepancy between what's in the slides and what's in the staff report. I think what's in the slide, the schedule on the third to last slide is accurate in terms of weeks and days. And so right now we have budget hearings scheduled for 1 week, July 6th to 10th, and then the budget deliberations for the following week. Historically, I think I didn't go back and double check every year, my time in the commission, but I think historically we have been done by Wednesday of the second week, sometimes Tuesday. And part of why I'm bringing that up is because as we've discussed here before, the NACO annual conference is often overlapping with, and historically it's been during one of these weeks. This year it begins on the 16th. And so, and I do intend to, I'm planning to attend that. So right now, that will be a little bit tricky for me if we really think we're going to go through Friday. However, I'm one commissioner, and so I just want to take the opportunity to get some clear feedback or thoughts about any requests that commissioners might have come into this meeting having around a change in budget sessions or meetings, and then also hear some feedback about whether or not we think that being done by Wednesday, the 15th seems feasible, as it does to me.
And I do think, commissioners, we may start deliberations on that Friday. So that would give us an extra day. I think last year you did 4 days of deliberations. Normally I can get y'all scheduled in 4 days. And then you took Friday to begin. We could maybe think if there are some topics to bite off on that date before, if we think we're going to have a lot of need for deliberations. So I would just my goal is that we're done Wednesday.
Yeah, thank you for
That's
that
what we're
reminder.
aiming for.
We have usually had 4 days of scheduled hearings where the
Yeah.
community partners and departments, so that by Friday we are ready to start deliberating.
Yep.
When are we planning to, how are we planning to manage the CFD1 budget? Because I know years ago we lumped them all in together and I was uncomfortable with that because they're separate mill levy conversations. So will we just tackle that on the 22nd?
Yeah, that and CIP.
CIP.
So
Okay.
yes, the CIP, the full review of the CIP and the CFD1 budget hearing will be held on the 22nd of July.
And so you're saying that we may start deliberating on the 10th? Is that what then you're saying?
Might possibly,
Might,
yeah.
okay, yeah.
I
can
would
fight
say
with that.
there'll be that date of the 20, I may have to move that. We will need to know CFD1's R&R rate. So I may need to move it up to that. We may have to do it like the Wednesday of that 16th. I may have to move their hearing up in order to get their R&R rate. Sean caught that for me. And we'll need to review their budget in advance of the R&R rate date.
Will that be part of our kind of morning schedule of deliberations during budget? Or will it be part of our regular work session on a Wednesday night?
Don't know. Up to you. Tell me what you want to do.
Yeah, I would suggest, I think that to your point about separating them out, that having a regular business agenda item related to the CHIP and, CIP, sorry, CIP and CFD1 makes sense to me versus throwing it in the mix of our department and community partner separate mill levy conversation.
It's also a possibility we could even do CFD1 early.
Yeah,
I mean, they're
was
going to
gonna
be
say it could be either Wednesday.
Yeah,
of-
they could even be like July 1st before you start hearings. So if the priority is just keeping it separate from our morning meetings and finding another time for it, we can find another time. I think we could still do CIP on the 22nd because you're setting the rate, the total dollar amount that goes into CIP in budget, and then you talk about which projects on the 22nd. So we'll just make a note to see if we can look for a new separate time, either on a Wednesday night meeting or a Wednesday work session for CFD1's budget hearing.
I like the schedule as it is. I think we're still answering that question, right? We talked about format for the materials. I thought you made a lot of changes this year to the format of the materials. I don't want to ask you all to make more changes to the format of the materials. I thought it was very helpful.
Yeah, I don't have any specific feedback about change in materials or format.
Yeah, I just want to know if you want to change anything. I don't, if there's anything you want to see different.
Dorsey or Anderson, you have any thoughts on that, around the budget book and how the materials are structured?
No, not on how they're structured. Are we talking about like date when we'll receive it?
My goal is to get it to you around, like we've always done it, around the end of June.
Okay.
Any other feedback, commissioners, that you have for staff about this, this presentation and this process as they move into the truly meaty part of?
I guess I just also just want to clarify that, are we going to use the same process that we did last year where we get the Excel sheet? Okay, yeah.
I want to say about the presentation, I really liked having the breakdown of the 1% county sales tax, because we always say it's a 1% tax, and yet it's not 4 times the quarter-cent sales tax. So I just think for the public reading that, like, we kind of know, like, it's distributed by county-wide. It's not just the county government, it's the other 4 city governments also. But I think that's been a really confusing math to put out to the public, so that we have 36% of the 1% county sales tax is just really helpful for me. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Sarah.
We do
We will go ahead
technically
and
need to
open
take
this
public comment.
up for public comment. Yep, I'm getting there. I know we did discussion first, but this is a regular agenda item. We welcome public comments. So if anybody would like to come forward to kick us off, that'd be great.
John M. 66049 was way better than the discussion that the city had on Tuesday. I encourage you to watch that video. There was an excellent presentation on salary and the relative amount that is being given to city staff, city employees versus other cities in the state. And I encourage you to look at that because you're facing similar type struggles. And I think there was some good data there in the meeting. Cost of living, I agree. What I heard, my Social Security didn't go up very much and is often falling behind what the cost of living is. Luckily, like you, I imagine I have savings, but there are many people that don't. And they have to make do between buying medicine and paying property taxes in some cases. So that is something we have to be careful about. The value of the dollar has fallen 18% in the last 5 or 6 years. So the amount of material you can buy with your dollar is much less than what it used to be, which is why everybody is confronting cost of living problems, not only government, but also citizens. So we have to keep that in mind as we juggle what services should be cut. I agree with what I heard because we just can't afford them. We got very close when we talked about outcomes and what the partners are asking for when they come in with supplemental requests, or any requests for that matter, at the beginning of the budget. It should be outcome based. The partners should know why they were brought on board and what the benefit is to the county and to the citizens at large. And they should be able to evaluate what they're providing, what their value is relative to those outcomes. If they don't know what the outcomes are, then that's a problem. Maybe the county can help by, and I've talked about this before, in the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, to specify what outcomes the county expects. But it is about goal attainment. And if they specified their request in terms of that goal attainment, it'd be much easier to rate on the part of the staff to say, yeah, they met it. They only met it partially. They didn't meet it all. They don't even understand what the heck they're doing here. And whether or not we should give them any more money. So I do think that's very important in terms of goal. And every employee, I've had quite a few management experience. Every employee I've ever rated over the years is always within that context. What have you provided the company? What value was that? Was it consistent with what the company needed? And we evaluate performance on that basis. Thank you.
Tim, will you push that button? Oh, John's got you.
Oh, okay. Tim Hamilton, 66044. Very much I agree with John. I appreciate the conversation that you're having. It would be really nice for the public to have a little more transparency. And what I'm envisioning is kind of what the city does, and that is, you know what the budget was last year, we can all look that up. Just break down what percentage of the budget goes for each specific department, and then break down what percentage of that is personnel. That was part of the robust conversation in the city last night on salaries. Now, Ms. Plinsky said that the increases are market-based increases rather than cost of living adjustments for personnel. So the question then is, what's the source of the market-based wage? I assume there's maybe 1,000 or more jobs here. Each one has a title. So each one is market-based to something. There's some source that with which you reference. Now, as an economist, I go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and you have occupational codes, and it tells you by region. It's easy to do that. KansasOpenGov.org has everybody in the county's salary listed there by title. So, the public can see that if they want to. But it would just be nice to know what's the source that's being used for these salary increases. There's also the potential of a recession that might be coming up. Inflation, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 3.2%. The Cleveland Federal Reserve, which really does a little more independent research on inflation, has it at 3.8. The personal consumption expenditures is at 4.1. State Street Index, which is what investors use to look ahead, are predicting 4% by December, by Christmas time. So if you're at 4% on increased property values and 4% is inflation, at the wash. So Commissioner Kelly's idea of looking at cuts is spot on. And I think you probably, the staff needs to be looking at maybe freezes on wages, and how do you cut? Are you going to cut wages? It's, a naughty word to ever say or do that. But if you have a recession that comes forward in addition to the inflation, that's called stagflation, then you're in a pickle. So looking at what to cut for each department is exactly what should be done. And you really ought to be looking at least a 2% cut and have every department come in and tell you what they do. Thank you.
Thank you both. Is there anybody else who wants to provide public comment on this item? Anybody raise their hand online, Sarah? Okay, close public comment and bring it back to the commission in case there are any closing comments or thoughts or questions that occurred to you in the last few minutes. Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Brooke, for your presentation, and Sarah for all the information and work so far. Commissioners, good discussion. I look forward to continuing it. I'm going to take a point of privilege and ask, we've been going for about 2.5 hours and I do need a break. So I'm going to ask our LDCFM friends to hang on tight for us for just a few more minutes. And I'm going to take us to a recess until, I'm going to look at my computer time because I think that's more what all of us have. 7:52 right now. We'll come back at 7:57. Thank you. All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate that break and opportunity to reset. We are back in session for our May 6, 2026 business meeting, and our next item is with LDCFM, and I think I'm just turning it straight over to them. Is that right, Sarah? All right, John, show's yours.
Mic is on. Sharing is started, I think. Okay, we can see that. Okay. Well, commissioners, thanks for letting me come and kind of present something that has been developed by the governance group, which is made up of LDCFM staff, city management, county management, as we work through the joint governance of the LDCFM organization, and present something that we've been working on, which is this shared expense formula. So try to be a very brief but cogent review of like how LDCFM operates as a joint service. We have a joint budget that is essentially divided. So we have what we call like 3 buckets of money essentially. And LFD is the Lawrence Fire stuff. That's essentially about $600,000 in round number for fire expenses only. So things like you see there, fire hose, fire preventions, things like that. Then we have the DC EMS budget, was just Douglas County EMS, which is EMS only functions, which is 1.2 million. And that's for stuff that is pure EMS functions. And then the lion's share of our budget is shared, which is a reason or example of why the operating of a joint service like ours is such a value to the community, is that we're not having two agencies both buying these things, because so much of what we do is a shared expense. And so that's things like operations personnel, station vehicle maintenance, stuff like that. So that's $30 million, which is about 94% of our operating budget. So that's when we think about LDCFM's budget, while LFD and DC EMS are there, the overwhelming majority of it is shared. And so obviously the city is going to pay for the LFD side. The county is going to pay for the Douglas County EMS side. And then there's going to be a share of who pays for the shared expenses. And how we determine that is really the question that we're answering through this proposed new budget calculation. So a little bit of context. Prior to 2026, it was basically calculated. We had at that time 5 fire engines / quints, 1 ladder company, 2 battalion chiefs that were all assigned as being from the fire side of the house. And then we had 7 ambulances. Of those fire engines, they were all staffed with 4. The ladder was staffed with 3. And each of the battalion chief positions was staffed with 1 battalion chief. And then each ambulance is staffed with 2. So when we put those together, you get 25 folks on the fire side of that, and then you had 14 on the EMS side of that. When you do the math, that turns out to be 64% from the fire side, 36% from the EMS side. So when we had the shared expense formula, we had 36% of that funded by the county, the other 64% funded by the city. So that had worked very well with relatively stable staffing. The issue was, in developing the 2026 budget, there were a number of staffing changes. For one, we moved 1 firefighter from engine 5 to ladder 5, shut down that engine. We also stood up a new ambulance, thank you, the county commission, for another 2 folks on the EMS side of the equation. And so what that was, well, it was a net reduction of only 1 riding position. It was a bigger swing in the proportion of folks that would be assigned to the EMS side than to the fire side. And so that would have worked out to be 22 on the fire side and 16 on the EMS side, which under the old rubric would have been a 42% split, which is a big swing for essentially just opening up 1 new ambulance. So what we ended up doing was taking the reduction amount that was directed by the city, combined with the service levels that the county wanted to make sure that it maintained in the case of Medic 6 Enhanced, and kind of reverse engineering from what the money needed to be, what that shared expense would be as a 1-year process. And so that's when we went from the 36% contribution in 2025 and before to this year, it's 40.3 to 59.7%. But the entire time this process was going on, we realized this was going to be a 1-year process while we tried to figure out a better solution, which is what we're trying to kind of do with what I'm proposing. So the current shared expense formula, when you look at it at the 64,000 foot level, it's based on only fire or EMS staffing. So that's really easy to understand. It's intuitive, it's simple, and it's good as long as our staffing levels are either stable or they're going up or going down at the same time. Where we found out, sort of inadvertently last year, was if only one side is going up, or if one side's going up and the other side's going down, there are big swings, because when we're talking about a $30 million budget, 1% of that is $300,000. It doesn't take that many percents before we're talking, millions of dollars. And also the effect of the staff positions the effect of changing that percentage outweighs the effect of wages. So we can be in a position where we add staff, but depending on which side of the equation that staff is allocated to, the other side actually ends up saving money, even though they're technically contributing more in wages. So we had a lot of incentives that really worked against each other under the old formula, because with less than 100 people staffed every day, each single position was well over 1% in terms of its effect. So when we said, what if we didn't want to get stuck with a single factor, because that seemed to be what was really causing the thing, what would we want to look at for finding different funding formula factors? And a lot of these had actually been an opportunity to incorporate things about different concepts of what is fair over the years, in terms of like, well, what if we looked at it this way? What if we looked at that way? And really what this is kind of what if we looked at it all of the ways and sort of put it together. So our criteria when we came out with these was we need to have things that are objective measurements, and those objective measurements need to be related to something about what we do. So service area or population that we serve, the demand on our services in terms of how much we're actually being dispatched to emergency incidents, and then our resource allocations. How are we staffing people? Where are we staffing people? Things like that. So we developed a six-factor formula to go from 1 to 6. And what I want to walk the commission through at this point is kind of really understanding intuitively what each of those factors means, because it's important that you would know what you might be supporting. The first is probably the easiest, the total population breakdown. So we took the city of Lawrence separate from Douglas County in terms of population numbers. This is using 2020 census numbers. And we found that there's about 94,000 people in the city, 24,000 outside of the city of Lawrence, which means that that breakdown is just about 80% to 20%. Then the next one's a little more hard to understand. It's basically the total population protected. So to get this metric, we basically said, if you look at the Venn diagram, it's an overlap. All of the Douglas County residents get EMS services, in addition to all of the people who live in Lawrence get fire services. So if we basically break those two groups of people receiving services, even though a lot of them are the same people, but when we're talking about the total universe of services delivered, that ends up with about 214,000 people that are services to people in terms of fire and EMS protection. So then when we say, hey, divide either the 118 or the 94 by that to get the relative proportion, you end up with 44.5% to 55.5%. Then we look at apparatus responses. And what we're trying to capture with this data point is that not all emergency incidents require the same number of resources. And so while you can say, yes, fire incidents are lower, and they are, then the amount of resources and time that it takes to mitigate some of those issues can be higher. So we wanted to look at, basically for this, how many times did we actually deploy a emergency asset, either an ambulance or a fire apparatus, to an emergency incident in 2025? And so just for an example, if we had a cardiac event, we might say deploy 1 fire apparatus and 1 ambulance. Put that together, that would count for the purpose of, even though it's 1 incident, we're counting that as 1 fire response and 1 EMS response. Now, if we had a motor vehicle accident where we might deploy a fire apparatus, but there's multiple patients, we might send 2 ambulances. So that would then count as 1 fire response and 2 EMS responses. And then if we have a structure fire, that's going to be even more resource intensive. Our first alarm assignment, we will send 4 fire apparatus. We will then send 2 ambulances as well. So if we calculate that, that would count as 4 and 2. So at the end of just these 3 hypothetical incidents, while it's 3 incidents, we've had 5 EMS responses and 6 fire responses in these examples. And so when we looked at not just 3 hypotheticals, but all of 2025, we find that we had about 11,500 on the fire side and just shy of 15,000 on the EMS side. So that's where you end up with 43.7 to 56.3%. Then we look at the fire EMS staffing ratio. This green column is essentially the only column that we were using before. So this is basically how we've got our people deployed. In conversation in governance, we discussed that because the concept is we'd be looking at a multi-year agreement if we were able to move forward with this, that would include presumptively at some point Engine 6 as well. So we're putting that back into the mix and charging that to the fire side, even though it's not currently in service. The idea is that it would be during the course of a potential agreement, or at least that we'd be increasing staffing. So we want to make sure that we capture that. We also discussed that previously both battalion chiefs had been accounted toward the fire side. Thought, well, if they were 2 systems, you would need a supervisor in both. So we moved one of the battalion chiefs to count to the EMS side. And now we have 8 ambulances. So once we say we have our 6 fire apparatus, 1 BC on the fire side, we have the 8 ambulances and the 1 BC on the EMS side, you end up with, can't remember the number, yep, 25 and 17. So when we take that, that ends up with a staffing ratio of 59.5% to 40.5%, which if you remember, had we kept it with this year's deployment would have been, I believe, 58 to 42. So not quite at that point. Then incidents by planning zone. Basically, we divide the city and county into different planning zones as part of our accreditation process. And we just really looked at like total incident volume, basically within the city versus within the county. And we do that by planning zone. So what we find here is, over 15,600 come from the city, a little over 2,000 come from the remaining part of the county. So when you put that together, it's 88.1 to 11.9, which was interesting to me because while the city has about 80% population, it's even higher in terms of where we have our call volume, probably for a number of factors. And the last thing, and this is probably the one that's hardest to like wrap our heads around, but is I wanted to look at like our organization was founded by the merger of Lawrence Fire Department and Douglas County Ambulance Service in 1996. And as we've mentioned by the shared thing, that is a great value to the community. But if that had not happened, based on call volume today, what would the relative demand on those two services be? Because I thought that was an interesting data point. So to figure that analysis, we looked at qualified data. So we have a different data set that doesn't look at all things. It tosses out outliers and things that get changed to like be a different response time, or if we upgraded to really only look at true emergency responses. So it's not the total universe of all incidents. It's only the emergency responses that stayed emergencies for the entire time. And then we said, okay, if it was a medical incident under a world where LFD-CFM had not merged, you would have had a response from the ambulance service. You also, within the city, would have had a response from LFD in the same way that in the county right now, we have dispatched our jurisdictional fire partners. So that would count. A medical incident within the city would have counted toward both. Whereas in the county, a medical incident would have only counted toward DCAS and not toward LFD. A fire incident in the city, under our current merged model, both fire trucks and ambulances respond emergent because the crew on that ambulance can do a medical standby, but they can also be used for active interior structural firefighting. So they respond emergent. But under a model where it was a single role service that did not do that, they would probably respond, but that would be a non-emergent standby response in the same way that we will typically respond non-emergent to like requests by law enforcement. So in that world, we would count a fire in the city as being an LFD response, but not a DCAS response. And a fire in the county wouldn't count toward anything because that would be handled by the jurisdictional fire. Hazmat, we have countywide hazmat response. So we figured whether it was within the city or without the city, it would still get a response by both LFD and DCAS. And the same thing with technical rescue, because while we don't have a formal agreement, we typically always respond mutual aid. And so assume that would be a joint emergent response as well. And so then to be clear, the next thing I'm going to show you, it's not a statistically valid heat map, but just as an example, what we basically did was say, hey, over the next, if you looked at where all of these calls happened in the course of a year, what did we see from all of that? And what we ended up with was dividing it all out. You had about 8,000 calls that would have been DCAS only, and again, we're talking about there's a lot of processing that goes into it, and then 7,400 would have been LFD. So when we look at that proportion, you end up with 48.1% to 51.9%. And then that with those 6 factors, we take the just average that is unweighted of all 6 factors, we end up with 60.6% to the city and 39.4% to the county. So the advantages of this are, one, it does consider the area and population served, the different service levels that we provide to different areas and populations, the variations in how our services are the demand and how they're utilized, and the calls that each agency would have potentially gone on if they were still separate. And it does still include also the factor that we've been using, resource deployment between fire versus EMS staffing. It's just, that's not the only thing. And the big advantage is that it prevents major swings in shared expenses due to relatively small shifts in how we apply our personnel to which riding position. And what I think will help if we're able to do this in a longer term budget session or agreement is allow more flexibility and fine tuning of service delivery. So rather than it being sort of like a zero sum game, if we add a person to this side versus this side, there's a winner and a loser. Now we can have more targeted conversations about really what is the best place to put our people, fine tuning service delivery for the overall good of the community without that sort of lurking in the background of if I say yes to this and they count on my side of the equation, what does that do to my budget? Or can I shift that to you and make it more of a collaborative and true, help the joint governance process along? So at this point, want to open it up for questions, comments, clarification, and then I have a few staffing questions, but maybe we start with questions and comments.
I do want to clarify, I think I have it wrong on the AIR. So just for commissioners, I think I got a typo in the future direction of what I put out there for you. The split is, remind me again of the final split, John.
60.6 to 39.4.
Thank you. Yeah, I had one number from last year and one number from this year, and they're all so close together. So that I apologize.
I got a question. What length of contract are we looking at, and how might things change in the length of that contract?
So we have had conversations in governance that, without putting words in people's mouths, it seems like everyone thinks that not just a year every year we're trying to renegotiate would be good. That's about as far as we've gotten. We've talked, 2, 3, 4. Sarah, if you want to.
Yeah, I think originally we really want to get to a 5-year contract. However, I think in 3 years, when Station 6 is fully operational, these numbers might modify again. And it's important to remember, we're not going to be adjusting these numbers year to year. We're picking a ratio based off of this formula, and we're sticking with it for a 3-year or a 5-year period. So I'm open to, I think obviously as a governance team, we're open to what the commission thinks. I do think I was leaning towards 3 just because we might know more once Station 6 is open. And this is based on some 2025 and 24 data, and you will have gone through accreditation. So I don't know. So there was some thought that maybe 5 years was a bit long for that.
With these recent maybe they're not annexed yet, but the western expansion, is one more station going to be enough for 5 years?
Our previous station optimization plan indicated a need for 2 stations plus a removal of a third. I can't speak to whether or not that will be approved in the next 5 years.
We are looking at further expansions down the road someday.
I would say that was the result of the station optimization analysis that we have done, is that looking at resource deployment, the current is not adequate to the needs in terms of response times for our community. Also, I do want to, if I can, respond. You had also asked about how do we think it's going to handle year over year? For context, I did a bunch of different variations of this, looking at for example, we are all built on 2020 census data because the governance team felt we'd rather use that than the mid-period estimates. But I did look at it with 2023, 2024. They don't have the 2025 estimates out yet. And really, it moves the red column. Actually, let me push back to that, sorry, so I can kind of show you what I'm talking about. So if we use the 2024 census estimates, it would move the red column to be 79.8 versus 20.2, and it doesn't change the final number. And the entire point of doing it this way is that it's fairly robust against minor changes because they're mitigated by other factors. So for instance, we were looking at what would the population have to change to move these numbers. And so, just if we look at the red column by itself, you say, okay, to move the end result by 1%, it would have to move a single column by 6%. And so a 6% shift of population from the city to the county, for instance, would essentially be the equivalent of right now 7,200 people moving from Lawrence into the county, or more than one Eudora. So just for context, the odds of that happening in the next 5 years are not, I would think, high.
So Chief, did you use 2024 call data or 2025 call data?
So when we first built this, we did not have the 2024 call data. 2025 call data. So we used 2024. We have since updated it with 2025 call data, which actually saw the percentage move by 0.4%. And again, as an example, we saw in that time period, and I don't remember the exact number, but between apparatus responses, incidents by planning zone, and LFD DCAS incidents, it was like about a 3% shift in some of those numbers from city to county, but it ended up only being a 0.4% when we factored that through the formula model, which again sort of speaks to like, it's pretty, I mean, it will change. That's the point. We don't want it to just be fixed forever, but it's more stable against those minor variations causing a 3% shift, which would be significant if it was a one-term thing.
So I guess I'm curious, first of all, I think this is a phenomenal framework, and I'm really glad we're having this nuanced conversation because there's been a lot of what ifs, and so this captures so many of them. But I'm really curious about I mean, the processing power that goes into it. If we're setting up for a 3-year or 5-year governance contract, are we really needing to lock in at the 60.6 and 39.4, or are we locking into this is the way we will process it year by year, knowing it won't swing very far? But there will be change. And I'm really thinking in terms of, staffing changes will still be a thing. They may not have a big impact, but they might have some impact. So just, is it necessary to just replace the old single formula with this more robust formula and keep the percentages the same for that 3 or 5 year? Or is it just what I find to be most value is to keep this framework the same?
I mean, it was originally direction from governance that no, we're locking in on this percentage based off of this methodology, but that we're not going to recalculate this methodology every year. It's very intensive for staff.
Also, it is a snapshot. And whenever you pick that snapshot, you'll have data from some pieces of data, but not others. So for example, and I think this is trying to have like some of that temporal equity where, we're using 2020 census data because that's the most reliable. We're using 2025 incident data because that's the most reliable. In terms of the fire staffing ratio, we're really using, 2028 data in terms of we're building it with Engine 6 in mind. So for instance, if we said, well, we want to update it every year, well, we're not going to have the incident data until sometime mid first quarter, second quarter. And do we so there would be some logistical complications to that as well, in addition to just the effort to calculate it.
I'm interested in the use of total population. All the others, I understand, like it's about use of service. Tell me about total population and why when I read the AIR, it's like it was easy to calculate, but why do we think that's important?
So I would look at that as potential demand. So when I looked at other agencies, especially fire agencies, they will often use assessed valuation. The issue is, well, we could look at that for the city, but we're not really protecting property in the county as much, but we are looking at how many humans' lives we're trying to protect. And so that's where and on the fire side, we also obviously want to protect lives from fires. So that seemed to be a more universal constant in terms of looking at not just demand, but sort of like potential risk. Is that?
That's your answer. Great. Okay. Thank you.
I had a question about fire and EMS apparatus and how the costs of those factor into this. So if we're adding or subtracting, like some years we buy 2 ambulances, some years we buy 3, depending on like those huge lead times and the turnover. Will variations in that make an impact on the shared bucket?
We haven't quite gotten to capital yet in terms of governance. Right now, the county pays for ambulances and the city pays for fire trucks because they do seem to be pure on the fire. They're not necessarily shared. So it isn't something that we've necessarily talked about changing that from a governance, unless you can remind me of something else. So I think our recommendation would be to stay with that unless the commissioners see a reason to not do that. I will tell you, fire trucks are even more expensive than ambulances. So I don't mind staying with us just paying for ambulances.
well aware.
We just bought one on for CFD1.
For the multi-year agreement, since you met with the city of Lawrence yesterday, did they agree to a multi-year agreement?
I believe the framework and the staff question would be, or did,
I would say agree. We are looking for guidance from the commission. I don't think anyone took votes to say, here's the governance agreement, 3 to 5, what it is. So we're looking for guidance to prepare the 27 budget and what kind of feedback do you want to take back to governance so that we can bring back a formal recommendation to you on the governance agreement. Does that make sense? Because I don't want to pin the city down for something that they, unless there was a motion they made that I'm not aware of.
there was not a motion. All 5 city commissioners said they supported the concept. And then the direction would be that we would go back in governance and work out a more robust EMS agreement.
Did they weigh in on 3 to 5 or multi-year?
I don't think there was specific guidance.
Okay.
It was that we would
Okay.
hash that out in governance.
Thank you. I was just curious if they weighed in on any sort of timeline or any particular year structure.
When does Station 6 open?
2029.
But that doesn't necessarily, we would be hiring in years prior to that.
They'd be hiring in 28 for station opening, I think Q1.
So I think we're hiring some in 27 and some in 28. We're splitting it up because we have to maintain our recruit academy process just to maintain attrition as well.
So this agreement would be effective January 1, 2027.
Correct. But I would use these percentages to build my 27 budget. So that's why I'd like to know now. And then we have all year to work out the governance agreement.
I would suggest a 3-year.
That's what we were thinking, 27, 28, 29, get through that year, know where the budget's at for 29 and use that to build it. We still won't have census data, but if 3 years from then, we would definitely have census data, or 2 years from then, we would have new census data and we could use that at that time. That's what we were sort of thinking.
Yeah, I agree. I think that 3 years makes sense to me. And originally dialing back to our budget conversations last year, and about this governance agreement, my original logic was that we should make it a longer agreement so that it gives more time. It saves some staff time in terms of all the preparation that goes into that and all the meeting around governance. 3 years can go by fairly fast and all of that. But I think specifically given, since it's such a big change and a very positive change, I think that starting out with 3 years instead of jumping to 5 years is smart to me. And for the other reasons that, Sarah's mentioned about the timeline where we're at with Station 6 expansion, and that's probably the most, or potentially the most impactful factor that might adjust these things in the coming years, whereas all of the other factors, now that they're spread out, that some of the examples we've talked about, how those adjust year over year, are a bit negligible, but Station 6 might be less so. So I think 3 years makes sense to me. I also think that I also think I lost my thoughts, so somebody else take it from here.
Yeah, if we're weighing in on, thoughts and perspectives, I think the 3 years is a good time frame. I think we've learned a lot with that first governance agreement and how hard it was to get it. I think we're working much better together now, and I think this governance agreement, we've learned a lot. I think it will, each iteration of every 3 years or 5 years, whenever we do this, I think we will have, bring the information we've learned into that next process, and it won't be nearly as hairy. I think checking back in at 3 years to make sure that our, recalculate our formula, make sure it kind of, check some assumptions and just see how it's been working out. But I think this is a very strong framework for us moving forward. I almost want to say brilliant. Like, these are captured so many of the conversations over the years. Well, what about this? This isn't fair because we didn't figure this factor. Here they are, all laid out, and it really makes a compelling story, and I think something that I'm really happy to get behind. So, good work.
I don't mind 3 years. I'm interested to see how this data changes with an opening of a new station. And maybe you can look at that now. You know, if you, I don't know what your modeling software looks like or how that would, you know, I was trying to think about which one of these factors would be impacted by another station.
Well, the ones that are driven by demand would kind of be independent of that. The ones that are driven by population would also be independent of that. The only thing I can think of is maybe the yellow, because if we have one more fire truck on the streets, maybe sometimes we are out of fire trucks, we send one. I don't necessarily think that would be a big shift. But you know, that's TBD, I guess, because the green also already kind of encapsulates Station 6 opening up.
I do think some of the orange might be impacted because if those annexations happen, those
yeah.
are things that are currently in the unincorporated area that would come into the city of Lawrence.
And I'd say, I mean, that could theoretically be impacted by expansion of other municipalities too, right? Because it would be lessening the number of unincorporated.
No, sorry.
Well, not necessarily.
Not on the
actually,
Douglas County
because-
side, because
yeah,
for
because
EMS,
everybody
we
is EMS, so
cover those.
never mind. I hurt myself.
I think the only thing that might throw a wrench in the formulas and everything would be if there's a drastic new cut from the city. For like, would we have to refigure some things at that point? And it still might not sway things a lot, but I guess that's it. And we're talking about variables that would happen within that 3-year time frame. Like that's the only one I think of.
One of the, to respond to that, one of the things that we looked at was like, how does the shared percentage change under the old formula versus the new formula? And what we found was ballpark like 1.1 to 1.5% shift per staff position. So for a 4-person fire engine, standing it up is 6%, shutting it down is 6% shift back and forth. Under the new formula, it's about 0.2%. So you say 0.2% times 4 is 0.8%. And again, that's the average overall, not within the green column would shift, but that would be. So would it change? Yes. But we were looking at about an 8.8% change, not 6%. So when you think about out of a ballpark $30 million bucket, I mean, it's money, but it's not nearly as impactful as it would be otherwise.
Is there anything in the agreement about the county weighing in on wages for EMS?
We sit in on union negotiations with the city when they are negotiating with union membership. It's always been consultative, but we don't take a formal vote that is separate from where the city's position is. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioners, other questions? No, we've waded into some comments too. That's okay. This is also an item that's not for action tonight. And so direction for staff is what they're looking for. And then they'll come back to us with a formal recommendation in the future. But seeing no other questions from commissioners at this time, I'll go ahead and open this item up for public comment. Thank you, John. Thank you, Chief Darling. And go ahead and invite our first public commenter up.
John M. 66049. I saw this last night. I enjoyed it the second time. I didn't get a chance to say this yesterday. I really appreciate the fire department's analytic capabilities. I'm sure I'm just a simple taxpayer, but I'm sure I'd look at this as a methodology for how to analyze things. Used it myself many times. The fire department routinely, when they're doing analysis, defines their inputs, defines their outputs, and the metrics that move the data from one to the outcome on the other side. Outcomes have performance metrics in the fire department's perspective. And then, of course, they're used for cost analysis, accountability, and service delivery. Would that we looked at our partners in the same way on all of the exercises that they go through to deliver services to the city. So thank you for the illustration. and the consistency. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Anybody else here who would like to make public comment on this item? Okay, any virtual hands, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm going to move Sean into the panel for public comment. Sean, you're in the panel and can provide public comment.
Chair and Commissioners, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak with you tonight. Was very excited to see this information. Thought Commissioner Kelly would be particularly interested in seeing it with all the data inputs in it. It's also very excited to hear throughout the presentation the talk of the governance committee that was put into the agreement when it was created in 2022. And I think we're really seeing the results out of that strong work by the governance committee coming forward. As we look at the new percentages, I think it's important to go back and reflect a little bit about where all this originally came from. In 1997, during the merger, they took the fire department's budget, they took the EMS budget from DCAS, they combined those together, and then they said the budget of the fire department was about 74% of that total, and the counties was 26%. And that's the numbers we'd worked with, and those stayed in place for about 25 years until 2021. Commissioner Polinsky, city manager, worked together with Wichita State University to have a very thorough analysis of what we were doing, and they looked at a lot of different services. There was no model for cost of services out there in the country. Everybody had a little bit different one, and so that's when we settled upon the staffing levels. I do find it very interesting that once the analysis was all done, that the percentage came up and it was very close, within 1% on each of them, what the fire and EMS unit staffing was that existed. Also, just to remind everybody, you talked about the capital as it is in the agreement and the percentage. Currently, those percentages are applied to shared expenses on capital. So that will need to be discussed as talked about, but also the internal operating costs or internal service fees that's applied as well. The last thing I'd like to recommend that the process for developing this new percentage be archived in some ways, because 20 years from now, when people come back to look at this comprehensive system, they may not remember how it was derived or come about. So I think it's important to reference that for the future. There may not be a lot of people around that were here when this is derived. And lastly, I want to appreciate the support that the county has shown to the delivery of EMS, high quality EMS within Douglas County. And as a citizen of the county, I'm very grateful for that support you provide. Thank you.
I believe Sean is also known as former Chief Coffee. He didn't introduce his full name.
Thank you, Commissioner William. Any other public commenters, Sarah? All right. That we will close public comment and bring it back to the commission. As mentioned before, this is not an action item, so there's no recommended motion before us, but if there are any closing comments or thoughts, now's the time.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate both entities coming together and trying to figure something out. You know, Sean said archive it. Chief Darling, I recommend you trademark it because I can see you at some sort of conference sort of pitching it. I did ask that question about total population because it sort of set me back when I read it, thinking about like, when we think about Douglas County, that's like 100%. So, you know, I think we need to be real clear at what you said. It's about risk and demand, not about the number of taxpayers in each area. That's a different way than when I first read it, that wasn't how I thought of it. And so that was helpful. And I'll communicate that with some people who've asked some questions about that as well. But, you know, it would be interesting. You know, one of the things that happens when you use data is you sort of weight all the categories the same. And I think it'll be interesting in 3 years to see, should all the categories be evenly weighted towards that average, or there's some factors that are more important than others and need different ratios. So I don't know the answer to that, but I think 3 years is a good enough time to sort of figure out what in our statistical modeling here might need another look.
I thought that one of the variables that was not used was property valuation, and I thought that was also really wise because we know from our medical and fire both responses that that's not that high dollar neighborhoods get a larger response or require or should versus across socioeconomic. So I think that was also smart. Commissioner Anderson and I got a preview of kind of this model to give a chance to give a little feedback before it went to the whole body here a little while ago, and I've had some time to poke holes in this, and I have not been very successful at that. So I do think that we will continue to learn over the course of whatever time period we set, maybe the 3 years or so. Like Commissioner said about should some of these be weighted differently, but I think that this is a pretty great place to be starting from, and I hope that other departments in other places that do kind of a shared governance might take a look at this and modify it to their own needs. So really well done.
I'll echo all those positive sentiments and say that I already have 3 commissioners that I've met in other jurisdictions around the country that I've talked to about shared governance around this, that I'm very excited to send this video to and agenda items. So you should consider parading it out at some conferences and sharing it with your peers.
I'll just say well done.
All right, and thank you all for your work on this. We look forward to the recommendation later this year about a formal agreement. With that, commissioners, we are at the conclusion of our general business agenda for the evening, and we'll move on to appointments. And I failed to pull up Sarah's note before, but I don't think we have many appointments ready, but maybe some. So commissioners?
So commissioners, we've had discussions here about appointments to the Planning Commission. It was referenced tonight in public comment. Commissioner Willie and I have met with a number of people and are pleased to recommend Mike Kelso be reappointed and to appoint Andrea Perdue. You received the letter of intent and the resume and Sarah's memo. We're excited to make this appointment and hope you'll support it. Yeah.
Do you want to make separate motion? Well, I guess that was just really informational, but should we make separate motions for those appointments?
Sure, I'm happy to make motions. I move to reappoint Mike Kelso to the Planning Commission.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Passes
Commissioner Willie,
unanimously.
you want to do the other one?
I move to appoint Andrea Perdue to the Planning Commission.
I was wondering if we could have a conversation, since we're appointing a new individual, if we could have a conversation around the criteria that you used to evaluate the applicant.
Probably need a second though before we have a conversation because we have a motion. Is that right, Chair?
Yes, thank you. So if we have a motion and a second, and then we can have discussion before taking a vote.
Yeah, so I mean, second, there we go. One of the things that I was interested in hearing about planning commissioners is for me personally, their approach to working with their colleagues, their approach to listening to the public, and their approach to working with commissioners if we have questions and concerns.
I like to look at what's the general makeup of the commission and what gaps are there, because no one person can bring the whole range of knowledge and base that's needed there, and so each people bring different strengths, and from my time on there we were heavily weighted in some areas and thin on others, and so really because we have a lot of just really like in having a strong environmentalist on that commission. Like I said, we don't have to have that everybody has that same skill set, but that was one that I really wanted to make sure that we had also.
commissioners have more questions or discussion before I call it for a vote?
I think this is bad timing to make a change due to some of the things going on in the Planning Commission with the Northern Corridor study, the reevaluation of zoning codes, and I think we can use the 3.5 years of experience that the current chair has rather than throwing somebody in there with no experience.
The hesitation that I had just have with the current applicant that I shared with Sarah, in reading the applicant's application, in comparison to some of the other applications that we've received in the past, a lot of the other applications that we typically receive, the applications are more balanced, and this one just did not seem as balanced as some of the other applications have been in the past. And so it just led me to think that the applicant would, so it basically led me to think that the applicant would definitely vote in a particular direction every single time. And so I'm more looking for an individual that would be more balanced and that I would not know the direction that person would vote. And so that's my main hesitation.
That was a topic of conversation with anybody who'd expressed, and I talk to folks, every year and throughout the year, for people that either express an interest or that I think might be a future, because every couple of years we have these come up. The difference between advocacy and leadership, and coming in with a particular set of perspectives and values, but also staying open to being curious. And that was I was happy with the answers that I got, but I do recognize that that's the set of questions for everybody that applies.
All right, commissioners, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Had some commentary or some discussion about it. I'm going to go ahead and call it for a vote. All those in favor, will you reiterate your motion just one more time?
To appoint Andrea Perdue to the Planning Committee.
Thank you. I want to make sure I remember her name. All in favor of that appointment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, please, same sign.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. That appointment passes 3-2. Are there any other appointments that I'm forgetting about, Sarah? Okay, thank you. All right, with that, we'll move on to item 6 on our agenda, which is Commissioner and Administrator Miscellaneous, and we'll start with Sarah's memo.
I had one other comment.
Okay.
I think we need a more robust written process for especially planning commissioners, not so much some of the other appointments, but I think we just need to document how we're going to go about it.
Are you volunteering to put that together, Commissioner Dorsey? Are you volunteering to do that work to sort of design and put together the process that you'd like to see? Yeah, I think that'd be great.
I will volunteer to help you.
And I just think we'd be remiss in not saying, like, these are really difficult positions and difficult conversations, but also just like the service within the Planning Commission is hard and difficult. And I also want to be thankful for the service that's been provided. So I appreciate that also.
All right, thank you, commissioners. Sarah, do you have anything to highlight in your memo for us?
Yes, commissioners, my memo's attached. We've got a lot of things coming up here. Just want to remind commissioners, on May 20th, you are going to have a 3 o'clock, most of you will have a 3 o'clock start for the Incident Command System overview for senior officials. We have hot off the press, the 2026 property tax rebate program closed on April 15th. This year, we received 475 applications, of which 397 were eligible. The combined total of those rebates is $156,123.47, with an average payout of $393.26 per recipient. This represents a 12% rebate on their
property tax bill and a 41% of their county property taxes. So please see the attachment for more details, but we're excited about that.
What was our budget on that?
It was 500,000 that we set aside one time last year. I think we spent about 40. So I'll get you an updated number on that as we approach budget. There also is some updated follow-up information that the commission requested related to the Peasley Promise Grant Match Funding. We got information on CTE from each of the districts. So that is attached. There's some notice of some public hearings related to industrial revenue bonds and from the city of Lawrence. And then some other updates. Hot off the press, I want to make sure the commissioners know this didn't get added to your memo, but I want to make sure you know that on Tuesday, May 12th, there's going to be a ceremony in here for the Douglas County Specialty Courts. Oh, no. Yes. No, it's going to be out in the lawn. They're going to plant a special tree at noon in relationship to National Treatment Court Month. And we'll have several of our judicial members of our judicial branch there. So if commissioners want to attend. And just to announce that Jamie Hsu, our county clerk, has been elected chair of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission Standards Board Executive Committee. And he is the first representative from Kansas to ever serve in this role. And so we're really proud of Jamie and his leadership at the national level on elections. With that, commissioners, we do not have a work session next week. And I just stand for any questions you might have.
Any questions for Sarah about her memo?
I do. I have a question about open appointments. I noticed the Crisis System Community Advisory Group is a new list of appointments. It says 5 total positions open. 3 of those positions resigned. Can you say a little bit more about that group?
That group has sort of revamped. Originally, it was the TRC Advisory Group, and it has been repurposed to an overview over the entire Crisis System Community Advisory Group. That group we've been getting several nominations for that, and staff is evaluating those, and we'll be bringing them to you shortly. I think it was the reason why some folks resigned is just how it changed. And then we also had a lot of folks that had some commitments, other things that they were serving on. So it was a little bit of those reasons as to why some of those 3 stepped down. But it also was a good opportunity for us to restructure that. So we'll be bringing that to you soon.
Okay.
I actually
All right.
met with one of those members about something else, but they did, attendance has been a real issue with the structure of it before. So I think some folks that just, they never could make the meetings because of other commitments. And so it just wasn't a fit. So I think that was a lot of it too. And then the change of focus, I think they're working on some great names that they're going to bring forward.
And when does that group meet?
I can get that for you. I think they work in a couple of different places, so I can get that for you.
Okay. All right. And so how many appointments do you think you're going to bring forward, or do you need us to find additional individuals to
We're always
apply?
we're always open to folks that want to serve those. But I know that we have received several so far. So
Okay.
I'll follow up with Bob.
Okay. Thank you.
And I do want to point out, we will, the Heritage Conservation Council position, that person is eligible for reappointment. I've not heard confirmation and if they're willing to serve. So we'll look into that.
Any other questions about Sarah's memo? Any miscellaneous items from commissioners for the good of the order? Okay, seeing none, we are adjourned. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.